For the stream to fire up across the internet, and then we'll go ahead and get started. It looks like we are connected and alive and well, so let's do it. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Grueller. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group and the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented thousands of good people facing criminal charges navigate the criminal justice system. And over our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with our justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have prosecutors behaving poorly. We have judges not particularly interested in a thing called justice. And it all starts with the politicians, the people at the top, the ones who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and I to follow, but sometimes have a little bit of a difficult time doing so themselves. And that's why we started this program called Watching the Watchers Live, so that together we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency back down upon that very system with the hope of encouraging some meaningful change. We're so grateful that you are here and with us today. We've got a lot to get to. We're still talking about the Capitol Hill fallout, and we're specifically going to be addressing what the DOJ had to say. So the Department of Justice was out. We had an FBI director, FBI agent, and a U.S. attorney who gave a press conference today that are going to be detailing a little bit about how this is going to continue to unfold in the coming days. A number of other people have been charged. They're giving us some information about what types of charges and the scope and the breadth of this entire investigation. So we want to break that down. We're also going to be talking about some more sort of, I would say, technical aspects of the whole riot situation that happened on Capitol Hill last week. There were some IEDs and some other information that is coming out about where they were located and sort of the scope of this thing. And they are going to be making some major adjustments to DC security, because next week we've got the inauguration of Joe Biden. Is that next week? Let's look at the calendar. It is next week, about 8 days from now. So they're going to be really locking down DC to ensure that no more nonsense happens. And we want to detail what that is going to look like. We're going to be talking about Parler suing Amazon. They filed a federal lawsuit in the district court for Washington. Going to break down what that has to say. And then we're going to talk about, to wrap up the show very briefly, there was a D.C. Circuit Court ruling that stayed a last-minute execution. A woman by the name of Lisa Marie Montgomery was scheduled to be executed. The underlying story was a heinous, really, really gruesome murder, and we're going to tell you about that if you're not familiar. But she is not going to be executed anytime soon, maybe a little bit longer, but interesting developments in that case as well. So we're going to get into all of it and more. We want to make sure that you are a part of the conversation. We do go live every day at this time, so I'd invite you to come and subscribe. Join us as we do so. Give us a like, a thumbs up. We would appreciate it. As a reminder, when we go through this program, I go through some slides. We're going to look at some primary source documents from the lawsuits, from the DOJ, and so on. And then we're going to do a live chat at the end of the program. But all of the slides that I'm going to be addressing are available for you for free in our Discord server, along with a copy of my book and an existence systems and some other goodies in there. So we would encourage you to go and check that out. All right, so let's get into it. I wanted to start with the DOJ. We see here that there was a press conference that took place this afternoon. The acting U.S. attorney, my FBI, had opened investigations into 170 people for potential crimes at the Capitol. 70 people have been charged, but they're expecting hundreds more will be forthcoming. They say that some people have been charged with minor counts, but major charges are likely to follow. And they're talking about here things like sedition and conspiracy charges, as well as even felony murder charges. And those are pretty serious charges, and not to undermine or, poo-poo the severity of what happened last week, but some of those people I don't think necessarily should be in prison for 20 years. Some of them maybe, right? Some of them were responsible for attacking officers and things. Those individuals, I think, certainly deserve a harsher penalty, and you can make good arguments for felony murder and for, attempted murder in many of those cases as well. But not every single person who was in there, in my mind, is guilty of, sedition. The way I sort of think about what happened at the Capitol, which, is a little bit controversial, I would say, because some people consider this entire ordeal, the entire component, the whole corroboration, I would say, or collaboration of everybody there, everybody who was in the vicinity. They're saying that the entire thing was basically terrorism. They were all sort of part of this ransacking, seditious conspiracy that was going to take out the Capitol building and instill a fake dictatorship or something. I don't know what their logical extension of that was, but the point is that there's a big group of the country that thinks that this entire ordeal or anything related to Trump is akin to terrorism or sedition or treason. And I just don't go that far. I mean, we saw that it was a small contingent of the entire protest or the rally that was taking place on the 6th that actually breached the Capitol and went inside the building. And so we can sort of break this into different buckets. We've been talking a lot about buckets when we're trying to analyze the election litigation, but it's the same concept here. There was a group of people that were actually violent. They were going in, they were knocking over the cops, breaking through the barriers, injuring people. One cop died, another one, died by suicide shortly thereafter. It was very gross, very gruesome scenery, not something that we wanted to see from our fellow citizens on American soil in our place of government. Not at all something that was acceptable. But that wasn't the entirety of that afternoon. It was sort of this big flurry of violence and activity that was followed by what were sort of analogous, what looked like to me sort of like a frat party, like guys just going through the Capitol building because they were having fun. They've been cooped up for a long period of time due to the coronavirus lockdowns, and they were just there. They saw that the Capitol building was open, and they were just going to go out there and just have some fun, walk out with a podium and do stuff that is certainly illegal. And I'm not condoning the behavior at all, not condoning it, right? Not encouraging it. I think violence and any type of this conduct is counterproductive. It doesn't do anything. It aligns the opposition against the entire Trump movement. The entire country that is, Trump supporters is now harmed as a result of the action of a select few individuals. But do those people, even though it's wrong and it's criminal and they were trespassing, do they deserve to be in prison for 20 years? Should they be charged with sedition? Should they be charged with a felony murder type of violation because somebody died even though they were not in close proximity to them? They may have entered the Capitol building an hour after, some of these shootings or deaths occurred. We have to be a little bit cautious right now. Everybody is in hyperventilating mode all over the place. Some sides of the country are saying that this was not a big deal, or this was infiltrated by Antifa or BLM, even though there's not any evidence of that I've seen. But it's a lot of people saying, well, it's not that big of a deal. Relax, right? Cool your jets over this stuff. On the other side, you're seeing everybody who say this is the end of America. I mean, I've seen people talking about this in the context of 9/11 and that the country is over. A blogger that I read over at hotair.com was saying the country's over. Pundit is his name. He says, nope, country's over. This is it. This is the end of the country in one of his posts yesterday. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. It's not either one of those things. Okay. This was a really bad, horrendous situation that happened. Something that is beneath America, something that I do not endorse or condone in any shape, manner, or form. I think what happened was terrible. But it wasn't a 9/11 as far as I can tell. It wasn't a Pearl Harbor like Chuck Schumer was saying. Okay, we have, a handful of people who are no longer with us. God rest their souls. But we're not talking about 2,500 people falling out of towers on burning buildings and 2 towers crashing to the ground in New York City. It's a little bit less than that, right? The damage, they didn't burn the Capitol building down. They didn't install a dictatorship. They didn't, get in front of the Senate chambers and start passing laws or trying to, take the government away from us, the American people. It was a little bit less than that. And so now, we all just have to remember that, that this has a tendency, this can get political very, very quickly, very quickly. And we're not talking about, in many cases, in my mind, actual terrorists. These are people who are just sort of, kind of idiots, just, walking into a Capitol building thinking that this was a big party and a lot of fun and not thinking clearly. They were caught up in the mindset of a big, a lot of energy, a lot of rallying, and they just got caught up in it. And I am a criminal defense attorney, okay? This is my day job. This is what we do here on a regular basis. So just take that with a grain of salt, right? I am somebody who is against, generally speaking, the over-criminalization of everything that we do in society. I mean, you can literally drive on your way to work. You've probably committed several crimes just based on your local statutes. I mean, everything that we do is criminalized, and it is, it can get very political. And I've seen the consequences of political prosecutions. We've seen this throughout our society, when we want to overly criminalize, the crack epidemic, like Joe Biden did in 1994, when they were passing the crime bills. I mean, they were locking people up for 5 years at a time. We're still dealing with the consequences of a politicized criminal justice system today. And I just don't want to see that happen on a grander context. I certainly think that there were a lot of individuals there who should be punished. They should be on probation. They should pay for damages. They should go through a court proceeding. They should have their due process. But to just lump everybody in there, everybody who was involved, all, let's say, a couple hundred people who were in there, to say they should all go to prison for 20 years for sedition is insane in my mind. It's just not even connected to reality. There are a select few number of individuals who certainly should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. People dropping off pipe bombs, people, smacking cops in the head with American flags or whatever happened that injured these officers is grotesque behavior. It's gruesome and it's not acceptable. They should be punished. But to just lump everybody up into the same bucket and then extend that bucket to anybody who's ever been sort of sympathetic to Donald Trump is just insane. It's just not the way that our justice system should work. It should be justice, not political justice. And the political winds are blowing very, very, very forcefully in one particular direction. And so today we're going to be talking a little bit about how we can turn the volume down on that. We have our first clip comes from this FBI agent. I apologize, I don't remember his name, but he started off the press conference from the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice is working with a number of different agencies, so the FBI, local law enforcement from around the country, and they're going to be investigating this and pursuing charges for the foreseeable future. Let's check in and see what this gentleman has to say.
In the weeks leading up to the January 6th rally, the FBI worked internally with every FBI field office to ensure that we were looking for any intelligence that may have developed about potential violence during the rally on January 6th. We developed some intelligence that a number of individuals were planning to travel to the DC area with intentions to cause violence. We immediately shared that information and action was taken, as demonstrated by the arrest of Enrique Tarrio by the Metropolitan Police Department the night before the rally.
All right, so that Enrique Tarrio is the founder of the Proud Boys, if you don't remember who that was. And so he's been in the news for a long time. He's been somebody who's sort of a provocateur. I think that they were saying that Proud Boys was racist, and then he was sort of ethnic in his persuasion, and so people are saying, how can they be racist if he's a black guy or partially black and all this stuff? He's been in the news. He was the subject of the debate when Donald Trump said Proud Boys stand back and stand by, and so they're sort of using this here as saying, oh, see, look, we did something, we knew this threat was coming, and we made some arrests, and so that has happened. He also said that we shared that information, and so what did they do with that information? We've had a lot of questions about this entire week and last week is what happened on the Capitol building or at the Capitol building when they just opened the doors, they sort of let everybody come in. Where was the stand down order? Did that happen, or did these officers do this on their own? Was it, voluntarily they just decided, hey, we're overrun and we're going to make that decision on our own? And you can't really fault him if that was the case. But what he's saying here, it sort of goes back to the idea that they were prepared for this. And we know now that they were not prepared. And last week we talked about the mayor in DC who sent a letter sort of preemptively on January 5th, who said specifically, I don't need any help. We don't need any help. The DC police, the Capitol Hill police, they're all cared for. They know exactly how to handle these situations. Now we have the FBI who says we knew that we sort of knew this was coming and we shared that information. So a big question that I've had for a long time is, what were those communications? What happened here? Where did this breakdown occur? Who was responsible for it? Because I think that it was a catastrophic failure, especially in the context of, having every single one of our elected representatives in the same building at the same time. You would think that they would have the best security on the planet, and they clearly didn't. And you got to, why not? What happened there? I haven't learned much about it. Here he
Other
is.
Individuals were identified in other parts of the country, and the travel subsequently disrupted. The FBI receives enormous amounts of information and intelligence, and our job is to determine the credibility and viability of it under the laws and policies that govern FBI investigations. We have to separate the aspirational from the intentional and determine which of the individuals saying despicable things on the internet are just practicing keyboard bravado, or they actually have the intent to do harm.
Yeah. And I
In
think
the
that's a
latter.
very important point. You know, this is something that we've seen a lot, and we spent some time. You know, when I was watching this guy speak, I was thinking back to the analysis we did on the Whitmer kidnapping plot. Big Gretch Rona, as a commenter called her. Gretchen Whitmer was the subject of this kidnapping plot, where these individuals were sort of planning to kidnap and kill her in Michigan, and it was a horrendous story. But there was something that happened there where they were. It was a lot of that keyboard bravado. They were communicating back and forth and sort of talking about plans and scheming around, and we're going to get this and we're going to do that. But it was all mostly talk. It was a lot of bravado until they actually started to surveil her house. They went around and sort of drove around, and then they said, okay, that was enough. So if you're going to take that same sort of analysis, if you're going to say, all right, the talk is not what is dangerous, it's the action that's dangerous, then the action would have been the storming of the Capitol building. And so, he's sort of talking, broadly speaking about how they were investigating these things. He talks about Enrique, who was arrested or detained, and the rest of the stuff that they just missed. And this is a very difficult thing for law enforcement to do. They have to decipher, and their job is not easy. I'm not saying, I'm not really drawing an opinion one way or the other, right? Their job is very, very difficult. They have to walk a very fine line, because you can have a big mouth on the internet, and that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to go storm the Capitol building, or you're going to go and kidnap Big Gretch Rona over in Michigan. So how do you distinguish that? How does something go from just talk into an arrestable offense? Well, you need some sort of action. You need some sort of activity. And they're saying that they were waiting for that. The organization in and of itself, unless there is something more, I don't think is enough. You can protest, you can rally, you can get together. But if you take an action where you're breaching into the Capitol, that is what becomes criminal. And I just want to make sure that we're keeping that distinction very clear here, because I'm seeing a lot more videos of people not being allowed to fly, and I don't know why not, right? I'm seeing them on Twitter that people are saying they're calling me a terrorist, they're not letting me on the airplane. And you go, well, was that individual, were they breaching the Capitol building, or were they just there at the Trump rally? Were they just participating in that? Because in my mind, that's not terrorism. That's political protest. Not everybody who was there is a terrorist, but they're sort of getting lumped into the same bucket. We got to be very careful about that. We have another couple clips from, I think we have this one from the U.S. attorney, and he is detailing sort of the scope of this, and it's going to be a lot bigger. One of the main criticisms that people had, particularly Kamala Harris, was one of her arguments was that there were two tiers of justice. That if you shower before work, you get treated differently than if you shower after work. So sort of blue collar versus white collar type of class warfare, typical stuff that we hear out of Democrats. But the point here is, the major complaint was that there was no justice, that all of these so-called, white Trump supporters were storming the Capitol building. The cops let them in and then escorted them out, and there's not going to be any repercussions. And we debunked that immediately, right? I showed you a list of a number of people who were arrested according to the Metro PD there. And then we've been following along and just going through the different affidavits, the different warrants, the different complaints and probable cause statements that have been drafted and issued by the FBI in order to go round up the additional suspects. And so Attorney Sherwin is now on talking about this is ongoing. I expect hundreds more of people being arrested. And what the FBI and law enforcement, the Justice Department is doing is they're investigating the case. And this is not uncommon. And so, the initial reaction from Kamala, who used to be a prosecutor, she knows better. She knows how this stuff works, or should. But she was, I would say, less than forthcoming about what the process looks like. A lot of people are just using this as a political maneuver in order to do something that they want to already do, right? Impose new policies, or rally more support, or raise more money, or secure an impeachment, because so much of the country is rowing in the same direction. Everybody's on the river of anger right now, and they want to capitalize that. They want to make sure that they're seizing the maximum amount of leverage out of this whole ordeal. So here is U.S. Attorney Sherwin, who's giving us a little bit more detail about what the investigation looks like.
Steve, I think I mentioned this before a few days ago, that just to begin, I think the scope and the scale of this investigation in these cases are really unprecedented, not only in FBI history, but probably DOJ history, in which essentially the Capitol grounds, outside and inside, are essentially a crime scene. and a scale in which we have literally thousands of potential witnesses and a scenario in which we're going to have, I believe, hundreds of criminal cases, both filed with our local courts, the Superior Court, and through the federal court system. So just to frame things, the enormity of this investigation is going to take a lot of work and a lot of effort, and this is not going to be solved overnight. It's not going to be solved within the coming weeks. It's not going to be solved within the coming months. This is going to be a long-term investigation, and rest assured, the Bureau, the Department of Justice, all the U.S. attorneys across the United States that are assisting these investigations, everyone is in for the long haul.
Yeah, so it's going to be going on and on and on, and it should. There are a lot of people here who should be prosecuted because there's some pretty dangerous stuff going on that we're going to get to in the next slide. Before we do, he also talked about what's called a page 2. So he's talking about additional charges. So I think the other thing that we may see, I haven't seen it thus far, but I'm sure it will, is this complaint that the people who have been arrested or targeted by the FBI are now sort of getting a sweetheart deal. Oh, they're just being charged with trespass. Why is that? Oh, these are just minor, low-level misdemeanor offenses. And people want blood. People want those people to be severely punished, and the ones who did something severely wrong should be severely punished. Not because you were there, but because you did something wrong. And so what he's saying is that, yes, and this is very standard, this is normal, I just wanted to sort of detail how this works. Oftentimes, an initial arrest occurs on a lower level charge to get the case in the system, to set release conditions, and to start the process moving forward. But they'll add what's called an additional charge, or they'll indict that individual, or they'll page 2 that person, which means they could originally be charged with like trespass, and it may look like that's all they're going to be charged with, but they'll get a new court document and they'll say, hey, you've been indicted on sedition, treason, whatever the laundry list of other complaints are going to be. And he ran through a lot of them. He was talking about, kidnapping, assault, many other ones, including felony murder. And felony murder is a big deal. That's an alley. It's basically a murder charge. It's called felony murder, even though you may not have been involved in killing somebody. The analogy that we use here all the time, I use it a lot because this comes up a lot, is the bank robber analogy. If you're the driver, the getaway driver, and the people who you're driving to rob the bank, they go in and they kill somebody, you as the getaway driver are also responsible for that murder. You didn't pull the trigger. You didn't even see the person. But because you were involved in committing the felony of a bank robbery, they're going to charge you with felony murder for that. So you can see how expansive that doctrine can get. Okay, if everybody who was inside the Capitol building when Ashley Babbitt was shot and killed, if they're responsible for her murder through the extension of the felony murder doctrine, it's a lot of people who are going to be charged with murder. So, a lot of this stuff is going to be, of course, subject to the discretion of the prosecutors. They're going to be able to decide who gets charged with what, and we're going to see how that continues to unfold. There are some people who should be charged very, very severely. We just saw this from Catherine Herridge. She posted this late last night, 7:22 p.m. And she said here that the timeline of the critical window on Wednesday is now coming into focus. And we spent some time talking about this. The time between 12:30 and 13:15 or 1:15 during this time is sort of questionable, right? People are really trying to piece together what happened, because as soon as that initial mob breached the perimeter of the Capitol building, it was just bedlam. Nobody knew what was going on. Everybody was trying to call everybody else. I think the Washington Post or the New York Times, one of them did a pretty good breakdown, a pretty good analysis of what happened and when. And there's pretty good indication that there were people breaching the outer perimeter of the Capitol building while Donald Trump was still speaking. And so people are saying, well, how could he be responsible for inciting that action if he wasn't even done speaking yet? And then the response to that is, well, he said something and they just took off, right? So the speech was still going on, but what he said in the middle of the speech was enough to trigger that incitement, and that's what he should be impeached for. And so, it's like 45 minutes, and everybody's trying to figure out what actually happened. I've got a big question about it too. I've talked about this a lot. What is the stand down order? Why did those cops just say, come on in? And they opened the doors for people. And then they didn't surround the building. They just sort of let people leave. And you're thinking, this is one of the most secure buildings, or should be, in the entire nation. They brought the Congress people back thereafter. Did they sweep the building? Did they sanitize the building for Corona? We have a number of Congress people who are now saying, well, I got Corona now, right? I mean, they just all swept them right back in. There could have been bombs, there could have been anthrax, there could have been anything in that building. And what was the sweep procedure? What did that look like? it's a messy sort of breakdown, and information is starting to come out. Catherine Herridge says, while POTUS addressed the rally, plus before he concluded, a group was already pushing into the grounds of the Capitol building, plus a first pipe bomb was discovered at 12:45 p.m., so right in that 45-minute window at the RNC, and a second pipe bomb at the DNC. And this was the first I had heard of pipe bombs being at two different locations, one at the Republican National, the RNC, and one at the DNC. And so she posted this. It's a quick look report from January 7th, which is 5 days ago now, and it's the first that I'm seeing it. It says explosive related activity on the day of riots in Washington. And so this looks to me sort of like a regular governmental report. Doesn't have any police anything on here, but you can see she may have covered a lot of that up. She's Catherine Herridge is a little bit enigmatic about some of her sourcing. So here's what she says or here's what this report says, not her, but she's posting the report. At approximately 12:45 Eastern time on January 6th, U.S. Capitol Police and the Metro PD and the Bureau of ATF, so ATF and FBI Washington, they received reports of a suspected pipe bomb with wires at the headquarters of the Republican National Committee in D.C. At approximately 3:15, a second suspected pipe bomb with similar descriptors was reported at the headquarters of the DNC. So you've got sort of equal opportunity pipe bombs now being dropped off at both facilities, and we certainly want to know who is responsible for that. She goes on, she says the analysis here is the pipe bombs may have been an effort to pull first responders from the Capitol, further weakening security to maim lawmakers evacuating. There's going to be a lot more information that looks like it's coming out. 11 suspected improvised incendiary devices also found near the Capitol, not known if connected or separate bombs. And you can see a picture of this. It looks like a cooler with some sort of mason jars that are filled with incendiary devices. This is approximately 1,800. A suspicious vehicle near the RNC was identified, which led to the discovery of a cooler with 11 suspected improvised with black smokeless powder, fireworks, 3 firearms, ammunition that were inside glass jars. At the time, the vehicle has not been, we can't see it because she didn't post the whole thing. Collected items and materials may not have been formally examined by something. They differ from the raw information contained in something else. So we have a little bit of information about it, but certainly highly concerning. Okay. And this is where I think, and I hope the investigation is really focused. I hope that we're not trying to go and charge, I saw some lady who just looked like she was confused about where she was. And she was like, wow, this is crazy. I'm in the Capitol building. She's probably 80 years old and she was just sort of moping around. I hope we're not going after that lady unless she created these bombs. I don't know. But she looked like a little lost grandma to me. And, I don't want to see her in prison for 20 years for sedition, where for something that in my mind wasn't sedition or wasn't treason. Okay. She got caught up in a big, wild scene, and that was the extent of her harm. So she should go through some formal due process and, and pay damages or whatever is necessary. And the real focus should be finding on these people. Okay. This looks dangerous. We've got 11 mason jars filled with smokeless black powder, firearms, ammunition, and I'm certain that the FBI will make us proud and make sure that these terrorists really should be brought to justice. Now, we also saw today that Donald Trump took a trip to the Alamo over in Texas, not the Alamo, I'm sorry, to Alamo, Texas, and on the way to the airport, he stopped and he spoke with some reporters. First time that I think we've heard him publicly. He released a couple of videos, but he's sort of been keeping quiet. And so I want to see what he has to say. Everybody wants to know what does he have to say. His response thus far, in my mind, has a little bit left wanting. He sort of condemned it, kind of didn't, and said no violence and peace and all that stuff. But it really wasn't enough to satisfy a lot of people out there. And so we were trying to listen in to see what he had to say here. Now, we're going to listen to this twice, one from MSNBC and then one from C-SPAN, because MSNBC just cut him off, right? He's still the president. He's got, looks like 8 days left. And this is what they think their audience should know from the president.
And what happened at the Capitol? What is your personal responsibility?
So if you read my speech, and many people have done it, and I've seen it both in the papers and in the media, on television, it's been analyzed, and people thought that what I said was totally appropriate. And if you look at what other people have said, politicians at a high level, about the riots during the summer, the horrible riots in Portland and Seattle and various other other places.
We are coming out of this now because the president has started to, as he occasionally does, often does, veer away from the truth. His video that he taped on Wednesday after the riots were happening at the Capitol was not viewed widely as totally appropriate. In fact,
all right, so they cut him off like halfway through his statement, and they just say, no, the president veers far from the truth, so even though he was going to answer your question, we're not going to show it to you. And what he was getting into is he said, look, I was given a political speech, and it's very comparable to a number of the other types of language that other politicians have used throughout the country in many different contexts and many different occasions. And we actually have one of those supercuts that we're going to play here shortly. So, that was his sort of, excuse addressing this. It was a political speech. It was a political rally. Everybody at every single political rally ever says, we got to go fight, right? We got to go, win and conquer and all of that stuff. Like that's how you get people riled up and supporting a political cause, is by bringing some energy into the forum. And they didn't want to hear it. So he starts rotating back to talk about BLM and the Antifa protests and everything that took place over the summer. We spent almost the entire summer talking about that, spent a lot of time on every one of those shootings and all of the criminal justice issues. And I was largely sympathetic with those until they got also out of hand. So, I think it's a very comparable thing to do, to just sort of compare and contrast. If we're going to set standards in this society, it should be an equal standard across the board. I can't stand this double standard stuff. What Trump does is bad, but if somebody else does the same thing that Trump did, they're good, because it's a favored political movement. Trump is a disfavored political movement, and it's not a good way to, I think, run a just and equal society. So here is the other clip of Donald Trump who gets to finish what he says here. This comes from C-SPAN. Now, the audio is bad at first, but it picks up. They clean it up. So you can't hear it right now, but they're going to clean it up.
They're dividing and divisive, and they're showing something that I've been predicting for a long time. I've been predicting it for a long time, and people didn't act on it. But I think big tech has made a terrible mistake and very, very bad for our country, and that's leading others to do the same thing. And it causes a lot of problems and a lot of danger. Big mistake. They shouldn't be doing it, but there's always a counter move when they do that. I've never seen such anger as I see right now, and that's a terrible thing. Terrible thing. And you have to always avoid violence. And we have tremendous support. We have support probably like nobody's ever seen before. Always have to avoid violence.
What is your role in what happened at the Capitol? What is your personal responsibility?
So if you read my speech, and many people have done it, and I've seen it both in the papers and in the media, on television, it's been analyzed, and people thought that what I said was totally appropriate. And if you look at what other people have said, politicians at a high level, about the riots during the summer, the horrible riots in Portland and Seattle and various other places, that was a real problem, what they said. But they've analyzed my speech and my words and my final paragraph, my final sentence, and everybody to the T thought it was totally appropriate. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Impeachment, sir. Will you expect to be impeached?
And that's it from President Trump. So apparently MSNBC didn't want their viewers to hear about that. It's a little too violent or vicious or something, that they get the full context of the president's statement. But regardless, they said, we got to cut away from that. But you heard it. I mean, and I think he's got a good point. People are very angry. I think that the big tech response has been very, very much in alignment with the shifting political winds. As soon as this happened, they all just kind of, caught that wind. They threw their sails up and they said, we're going to ride this thing hard. And they have. And Donald Trump is right. A lot of people are angry about it. Doesn't excuse violence, never would. But it is, I think, going to it's going to cause some sort of a shift in this country. I mean, people are very, very concerned about what's happening with big tech across the board. And you heard Donald Trump say multiple times, no violence, don't do it with violence. I know people are angry, but never violence. And there was another comment I saw, I forget who brought this up. It might have been Jack Posobiec on Twitter. I think it was him, actually. or maybe somebody that follows him, whatever it is. Doesn't matter. The point is they were saying, look, if Donald Trump actually said something that was extremely, extremely bad, then we would see it all day. We would see it on the headlines of every single newspaper. CNN would be playing it on a repeat. Oh my gosh, he said, go break down the doors of the Capitol. Well, he never said that, right? A lot of what he said was analogous to some other things that other politicians have said, and we're going to play that here in a short second. So let's talk about what they're going to do now that we know sort of what Trump's position is. We know what the DOJ is going to be doing. We do have an inauguration scheduled for next week, and they are sort of reorienting themselves over in D.C. This comes from the acting chief of police from the U.S. Capitol Police by the name of Yogananda Pittman. Says here, I'm committed to the U.S. Police Department through this challenging time. Thanks, everybody. We respect our police officers. The department is fully engaged with our law enforcement officers throughout the national capital region on all levels. We have comprehensive, coordinated plans in place to ensure the safety and security of everything for the inauguration. There will be, quote, no public access to the Capitol grounds during the inauguration. The event will go on as scheduled. The department has also been actively reviewing video and other source materials of some U.S. CP officers and officials that appear to be in violation of department regulations and policies. Our Office of Professional Responsibility will investigate these behaviors for disciplinary action up to and including termination. Several U.S. CP officers have already been suspended pending the outcome of their investigations. The investigation of January 6th riot will continue in collaboration with numerous law enforcement agencies aggressively working, and we're going to prosecute everybody according to the fullest extent of the law. So this is interesting, right? This is answering or addressing at least one of the questions I had. What were those police officers doing? We played that video where they opened the door, and as people were walking in, everybody was recording as they were walking into the Capitol building after the door just literally opened. Officers were saying, hey, look, I don't agree with you, but I respect you. I think there was another officer somewhere else who was taking selfies with somebody. And so, there is certainly, I would say, some reason to investigate misconduct on behalf of the U.S. Capitol Police, but I'm more interested in what were their orders? What happened there? Who gave them the orders? What was the strategy in order to deal with this thing? Because I think that would tell us a lot more about maybe who some of the puppet masters might be out there, who was sort of controlling the situation as this was all unfolding. I'm just curious about it. I'm not saying that there was anything wrong with what happened, or this could have been just total honest oversight. They just were not prepared. But I'd like to know a little bit more about it. I'm a curious fella. All right. Donald Trump also approved an emergency declaration today. This was yesterday. Today, President Donald Trump declared an emergency exists in D.C. and ordered federal assistance to supplement the response due to the emergency conditions resulting from the 59th presidential inauguration from January 11th yesterday to January 24th. So they're going to be just unloading all of the federal resources on that for the inauguration. They've got the Department of Homeland Security, FEMA. They're going to coordinate disaster relief efforts, alleviate hardship and suffering caused by the emergency. They're going to provide appropriate assistance, required emergency measures, public health and safety. FEMA is authorized to identify, mobilize, provide at its discretion any equipment and resources. And there's just a number of other people who are going to be supporting the efforts. And good, right? Good. We don't want any more of this nonsense. I've seen some sort of, some posters flying around on the internet saying that there's going to be more protests at all 50 Capitol buildings. And I'm very, very hopeful that is not the case. Okay. I do not want to see any more of this stuff going on because the response has already been very, very catastrophic, I think, for the country in terms of limiting free speech, kicking people off of the internet, deplatforming certain companies and entire ideologies. And that is troubling to me as an American. All right, let's talk about some lawyers. Okay, so there is a lawyer who is representing one of these people who has been charged with a crime. I don't practice law in D.C., and nobody's been charged with this offense in Arizona, in an Arizona court. They've all been charged, I think, out of state in federal courts and back in the jurisdiction where this happened. But there is one attorney who is a defense lawyer who is representing one of these guys who's going around the internet right now, and he is sort of getting skewered. One of these videos has 2.5 million views the last time I checked, and I'm here to lend a little support. I'm here to defend another defense attorney a little bit. So let me give you some background on this story. So this guy, you may remember this image that was wandering around. This guy is one of these rioters who was walking out of the building with the speaker's podium, right? So, and he's just pausing and waving like he's in a Miss America pageant, just, hey, just got the speaker's podium. It's a horrendous scene, but you got to be with me on that. That's a hilarious picture, right? The guy is just walking out with Pelosi's podium, and he's happy as hell about it, right? So even though, the whole thing was gross, let's pause and laugh at that photograph. Now he's going to pay a price for that photograph. He may have gotten a lot of activity on his Instagram, but not a good decision. A lawyer for the Trump supporter here who was caught on camera and waving around while toting Nancy Pelosi's lectern during Wednesday's rioting told reporters in an amazingly frank interview Monday, this happened yesterday, that the snapshot of his client presents a problem. He says, quote, "You have a photograph of our client in a building, unauthorized to be there, with what appears to be a podium or a lectern. I'm not exactly sure which one it is called, but that's what we have," said Dan Eckhart, a lawyer for this guy, Adam Johnson, according to Twitter posts of the footage. You can hear this attorney say, quote, "Obviously, that's a problem for you." A reporter says to him, "Obviously, that's a problem for you as a defense attorney." And he responds, "Yes, I don't know how else to explain that." But yeah, he says, "But yeah, that would be a problem. I'm not a magician. So yeah, we've got a photograph of our client in what appears to be inside a federal building or inside the Capitol with federal property." Johnson, 36 years old, was arrested Friday over the Capitol chaos and faces charges including knowingly entering or remaining in any restricted building or grounds without lawful authority to do so and theft of a government property. He was released on a $25,000 bond, which is a pretty sizable bond. That's not insignificant, right? 25 grand, that's a lot. And so these are pretty serious charges, and he's going to be facing those. Now, this lawyer, like I said, is getting a little bit... He's just getting skewered for this. And here is an actual clip of what he said to the reporters. Now, they all have masks on and the audio's bad, which is why I wanted to read the transcript. But here it is, just for fullness. Here he is.
Part of what you have to, factor into is, again, you just have to drill down on what actually happened. You have a photograph of our client, in a building, unauthorized to be there with, what appears to be a podium or a lectern. I'm not exactly sure which one it is called, but that's what we have.
Obviously, that presents problems for you as a defense attorney in that you have your client in the building at the time of the break-in.
I don't know how to else explain that, but yeah, that would be a problem. I'm not a magician, and neither is Mr. Bigney. So yeah, we've got a photograph of our client who appears to be inside the federal building or inside the Capitol with government property.
When it comes to the next court,
part of what you have to factor into is, again, you just have.
All right, so he's getting skewered, right? That had 2.5 million views, and they're going, wait a minute, what is this defense attorney he's just acknowledging, yeah, it was my client, got a photograph, looks like the guy. He's also carrying a podium from the speaker, and he happens to be inside the Capitol building. Yeah, it's not good. It's not good. I'm not a magician, not looking too good. And on the one hand, yes, I understand the critics. I understand here that the concept that you would just go and admit to everything is not common in criminal law, right? You don't see a lot of attorneys just going out there and say, yeah, OJ did it. Yeah, he just did it. Yeah, he killed them both. Sucks, right? I'm not a magician, but what can you do, right? That's not how you win most criminal cases. And, there are some other, I would say, defenses that somebody could come up with that are long shots, but they would be defenses. You could say, it was some sort of a temporary insanity type of claim. I don't think that's going to win. Yeah, you could say that he didn't know that he shouldn't be in there. That the Capitol officers sort of waved them in. Sort of the I was just part of the tour defense. That it wasn't him, that the identification was wrong. I mean, you can make any one of those claims and stick to them and put up a fight. And the reason you would do that is because you don't want to just give the government a win, right? If you put up a fight and you're challenging the government's evidence every step of the way, you want to build in some incentive for them to give you a good plea deal. So, most cases don't actually go to trial. Something like 1%, maybe 3%, if you're a very aggressive law firm, actually go to trial. Most cases are settled outside of outside of a trial. They're done by plea agreements where the prosecutor says, all right, you were charged with this laundry list of offenses, and instead of charging you with all three, we're going to let you plead down to one. Instead of giving you 10 years in prison, we'll give you 1 year. Take this plea deal. We'll close the case and we'll move on to the next one. The concept here is that the government is busy. They want to close cases, and so they want to give you an incentive to take a deal. Saves them a trial, saves them from impaneling a jury, saves them from a lot of costs, and it guarantees that they get that conviction, and they don't want to potentially lose that. So a defense attorney wants to give them an incentive to give him a good deal. And if you don't just, if you just roll over and say, yeah, we're guilty, you got us with a photograph, we're dead to rights, then they don't have as much of an incentive in order to give you that plea deal. But in some situations where, the case is just really, really, really bad, you can see that this attorney may just be trying to fall on the sword. It's a sort of a plea for mercy. It's going in and saying, you do have us. I'm not going to waste your time with a bunch of frivolous defenses, and instead work on providing context for the underlying offense and providing a lot of mitigation for the underlying defendant. And so two things: one, in context, he was one of maybe 1,000 people. He was one of somebody who got caught up in sort of a fury of passion, and the law has some maneuverability for some of those things. It's not called temporary insanity, but it's sort of just a passionate fervor that people get caught up in, and it's not really indicative of who they are as an underlying person. So this attorney may be trying to do that, may just say, listen, in context, my client is not somebody who is this variety of a person. They're not, they don't have any criminal history. They've got a good job. They've got a good family. They love this country. This is not who they are. This is out of character for this individual. And, you beef that up with some mitigation. You say, look, he has done this since that happened. He has, volunteered here. He's gone back to school. He's moved back in with his parents. He's doing all of this stuff to get his life back on track. How about we don't throw this guy in prison for 20 years? Right. And if you know your court, if you know your judge, if you know your prosecutors, if you know the clerks, if you know the other defense attorneys or the chief prosecuting attorney for the department or whatever, the context that he's operating in, that may be what they want to see. And he may know that. And they may just, he may be trying to just go in and say, look, super sorry, not going to blow up your office with a ton of motions. We're not going to get overly aggressive with this thing. We know your case is winnable. Let's not give both sides a ton of work to do. We're going to accept responsibility, and judges appreciate that, right? When they do sentencing, and prosecutors, some of them appreciate that. If it's true remorse, and as a defendant, if you show that, then they may give you a better deal than the next guy, right? If you have somebody who's in front of the court who is just 100%, 1000% sorry and has done things in their lives to pay for the damage, versus another person who says, I never did it, didn't do it at all, and I'm going to fight to the end of the earth to prove that I didn't do it. And let's say both cases go to a trial and one person loses and the other person doesn't. Well, or they both lose. The person who is very aggressive is probably going to get a harsher sentence than the guy who was not. The judge is going to say, you, sir, showed no remorse. You said that you were not wrong for this. You don't believe that you had anything to do with it. Therefore, I'm going to give you a higher sentence than the other guy who is very sorry and has made some changes in his life. So just a little bit of a backup for this defense attorney, because I think he's getting just a little bit of a dog pile, and it's not totally worth it. But it was pretty funny. All right, let's switch gears. We want to talk about Parler. Parler is one of these app companies that has gotten caught up in this just massive censorship, sort of the digital segregation, I'm calling it, that is taking place all throughout our country. Certain demographics are being segregated from other demographics on online platforms, and Parler is one of those apps that got caught up in that. They've been shown the door. They said, you're not allowed to be on the internet or use any of our services. So Parler was a competitor to Twitter, probably already familiar with it. If you watch this channel, you're probably pretty plugged in. And it got shut down. They said the Apple's App Store booted them out of the App Store. Google Play booted them out. And Amazon Web Services, which is sort of the backbone of a lot of internet companies. I think they run Netflix, they run Twitter, they run a number of major platforms because they have the best servers, or some of the best servers. I think Google has probably better servers, but also very good servers. And they are not allowed to use that at all. Amazon just said, yeah, your whole website's built on our platform here. Well, we're just going to cut it off. sorry, thanks for coming. Right? It'd be like if you're going home to your house in your subdivision and your subdivision just says, you're not allowed in anymore. You're going to keep all of that. Everything that you've built in that home is all just gone. And it's certainly troubling because Twitter kicked them off, and a lot of people or kicked Trump off and sort of banned, I think, 70,000 accounts, and has just really been purging a lot of conservative thinkers off of the Twitter sphere. Where do those people go? They were supposed to go over to Parler. Now Parler's gone. Supposed to go over to Gab. Now Gab is just overwhelmed, and they're trying to beef up their servers and so on. So it's been a problem. But Parler filed a lawsuit against Amazon for antitrust. They are asking the judge for an emergency order to tell to tell Amazon to plug them back in, turn it back on. Okay, we want our servers back, and we need access to Amazon Web Services. Parler hit back on Amazon on Monday. They filed a lawsuit accusing the tech giant of violating antitrust law by cutting off conservative-friendly social media sites on the web. This article comes from Politico. In a complaint filed in Washington State in federal court, Parler said that Amazon's decision was, quote, motivated by political animus. The background here is Amazon Web Services cut off the service to Parler just before midnight Pacific time on Sunday. They said the microblogging platform violated the terms of service because they weren't doing enough to combat the death threats that they were seeing there. AWS is 32% of the market. Google and Apple also booted them. Parler didn't have an exact number of users, but they accelerated their growth by 355% in 2021, and we're not even far into 2021 yet. And so there's basically nowhere else to turn for Parler. Might be the end of them. We're going to see what happens with this lawsuit. But let's take a look at it, run through it relatively quickly. There's a lot of text here. We're not going to spend too much time on it, but you can see the lawsuit was filed here. It's Parler LLC as the plaintiff versus Amazon Web Services. Verified complaint drafted by this gentleman here, David J. Grosbeck, filed in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Washington over in Seattle. The nature of the action, they're asking for injunctive relief. And what that means is they're asking the court to do something. They want a temporary restraining order, and they want the court to do something. What they're asking the court to do, we're going to find out. Last month, Amazon Web Services, popular social media platform, and Twitter, they signed a multi-year deal so Amazon Web Services could support the daily delivery of millions of tweets. AWS currently provides the same service to Parler, a conservative microblogging alternative and competitor to Twitter. So notice how interesting that is, right? The very first paragraph is not really talking about what happened to Parler, and it's not the original damage. It's saying Amazon and Twitter are in cahoots. Twitter just signed a multi-year deal with Amazon Web Services to run their platform. We tried to use Amazon Web Services to run our platform. We're a competitor to Twitter, and they just kicked us off. Sounds a little bit anti-competitive, doesn't it? Paragraph 2, when Twitter announced 2 evenings ago that it was permanently banning Trump, conservative users went over to Parler. The exodus was so large, Parler became the #1 free app downloaded from the App Store. Last evening, Amazon Web Services announced it would suspend their account effective Sunday night at midnight, stated the reason for the suspension was Amazon is not confident that Parler could properly police its platform regarding the content. Friday night, one of the top trending tweets on Twitter was, "Hang Mike Pence." AWS has made no plans for it or made any threats to suspend Twitter's account. And I saw that, right? Everybody was watching that. Why is Twitter letting those types of tweets and those types of trends percolate all over their platform when they're just supposed to be monitoring everything for violence, right? Wasn't that the whole reason that they booted Trump off, was because of violence? They sort of read violence into some of his tweets that didn't say anything about violence. They just said, well, if he's not showing up on Inauguration Day, well, that must mean that there's some sort of violent intent, or maybe this is a secret smoke signal to his supporters to come in, raid the inauguration, right? They were sort of interpreting it to just an absurd extent, and they use that as justification for booting him off there. But then a couple days later, "Hang Mike Pence" is trending on Twitter. They let that sucker just meander around, an actual phrase that is calling for killing another person who happens to be the vice president of the country. Kind of doesn't make sense. Amazon Web Services, they decided to terminate Parler's account. They say it's motivated by political animus. And it's also apparently designed to reduce competition in the microblogging services market to the benefit of Twitter. So you're seeing where that is. They're saying this violates Sherman Antitrust Act. Amazon is breaching its contract with Parler, which requires AWS to provide Parler with 30 days notice before terminating service, rather less than the 33-hour notice Amazon actually provided. And they're also saying Amazon committed intentional interference with prospective economic advantage given to the million of users expected to sign up in the near future. So 3 things. Number 1, you can see that the allegation is that it's antitrust, it's collusion. They're sort of working with one another to each other's benefits. Twitter just signed a massive deal with Amazon, and Amazon wants Twitter's business and that massive deal. Twitter doesn't want Parler, a competitor, around anymore. So Twitter uses its leverage on Amazon. Amazon boots Parler. Now those two just have this little match made in heaven. Number 2, they're also talking about their contract, right? If they signed a contract and Amazon is a party to this contract and they're supposed to have 30 days notice, then where are the 30 days? It's just a simple breach of contract case. They can't do that if it's in their agreement. And of course, I'm sure at some point that agreement is going to be known. If Amazon breached their agreement and they canceled it within 36 hours and they should have been 30 days, well, they're in breach. But why would they do that? Well, their third point is because they wanted to stunt the growth. Everybody was leaving from Twitter. They needed to act quickly so that Parler didn't gobble up all of those additional users. Parler, now people who want to go on Parler are sort of stuck in the wilderness, trying to get on Gab, trying to go to different, other micro blogging startups. But Parler had a lot of establishment backing. I think Dan Bongino is behind it, and a number of other sort of influential people that create that network effect had already been on Parler. And so you saw this mass exodus from Twitter over to Parler, but Amazon cut them off right at the knees so that they couldn't gobble up those users and build in a little bit of a foundation for the new platform. So it sounds very orchestrated. Paragraph 6, the emergency suit asks for a temporary restraining order. Doing so is to prevent it from shutting down Parler's account at the end of the day. Doing so is the equivalent of pulling the plug on a hospital patient on life support. It will kill Parler's business at the very time it is set to skyrocket. And I think that's accurate. I think that they're right. I mean, Parler, to my understanding, has been basically deplatformed from everything. So their payment providers are gone, their text provider, email provider, everything is just gone because big tech is that powerful. And so an entire medium and everybody who was on it is just gone with the wind because they don't like their politics. Count 1, they're claiming here in the complaint, under the Sherman Act, AWS is prohibited from contracting or conspiring to restrain trade or commerce. It's realleging all of the underlying claims. We're talking about the Sherman Act. Sherman Act says here, to state a claim, you must hit these 3 prongs. Plaintiff must allege facts that, if true, will prove the existence of a conspiracy, the intention on the part of the co-conspirators to restrain trade, and the actual injury to the competition. Okay, so I think very clearly prong number 3, actual injury to the competition, happened, right? Parler is totally screwed. They're basically dead in the water. Intention on the part of the co-conspirators to restrain trade, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to prove. I think you can definitely infer that, right? You can say, yeah, Amazon and Twitter have this massive deal going on, and as a result of that massive deal, Amazon's going to act in the interests of Twitter in order to push out some of their competition. And then if you can show that, I think you'll see the existence of a conspiracy is prevalent as well. Less than a month ago, according to this complaint, Amazon and Parler's competitor, Twitter, entered into that multi-year deal we were talking about. Amazon's reason to do so, Amazon announced it would indefinitely suspend Parler's accounts, but its reasons were not consistent with its treatment of Twitter, indicating a desire to harm Parler. So it's sort of this double standard that we're seeing elsewhere throughout the world right now. It's one politician could say something, but if Donald Trump says it, it's bad. They said it, it's good. Trump says it, it's bad. Massive double standards. Same type of double standard here that Parler is alleging. They're saying, well, we had some people say some bad stuff on our platform. Twitter has a lot of people say bad stuff on their platform. Amazon is only punishing us, but not Twitter. Why is that? Well, it's because there's a conspiracy, and they've got this they're in cahoots in order to support each other at the expense of Parler. They're also talking about breach of contract, pretty simple type of a claim going on here that, they said that if you want to terminate our stuff, we need more than 30 days. There was no uncured material breach of the agreement for 30 days as required for termination. Amazon used the term suspension in its notice. It stated that it would ensure all of your data is preserved for you to migrate to your own services. We'll work with you as best we can to help your migration. But this is not action Amazon would take for a temporary suspension, but rather for a permanent termination. So even though Amazon is considering this thing to be a suspension, we're just going to suspend you, take you offline, but all of that software you built, everything that you've been, creating on our platform, it's available for you. You can just pick it up and move it elsewhere. So we're not going to delete everything. We're just going to take you off of the internet, which is basically a cancellation. They can call it whatever they want to, but it is still a cancellation. Count number 3, tortious interference with a contract or a business expectancy. By terminating Parler's account, Amazon will intentionally interfere with contracts Parler has with its millions of present users, as well as with the users it is projected to gain this week. They're saying here in Washington, the elements for this claim, which is called tortious interference with a contract or expectancy, are. So let's break this down a little bit. Tortious interference with a contract or expectancy. So let's say I have a contract with you to sell you 10 widgets. We have an agreement that's all done and in place. I have a competitor who also sells a version of widgets, and he does something to break our contract. He does something to prevent me to getting from to our meeting, or he sabotages something, or he just acts in a manner that is going to breach a contract that we've already had in place. Well, the law says we don't want people to act like a-holes and going around and breaking up everybody's business. Right? There's millions of contracts all over the place. If people were just sort of lurching around and waiting for people to sign on the dotted line, and as soon as that happened, they sprung into action and they just decimated that entire relationship, that doesn't really serve a functioning society. So as a result, we say this is a claim. You can file a claim for tortious interference with a contract, and that's what they're claiming happened here. Amazon came in and interfered with the widget contract between Parler and the people who are using Parler. And in order to support that claim, 5 elements come out of a Washington case. Let's take a look at them. Number 1, the existence of a valid contractual relationship or business expectancy. So yeah, certainly Parler had that with its users. The defendant's knowledge of that relationship. Did Amazon know about it? Of course they did. An intentional interference inducing or causing a breach or termination of the relationship or expectancy. Yep, Amazon terminated Parler's ability to be on the internet. They knew what would happen as a result of that termination, and it did happen. The defendant's interference was for an improper purpose or by improper means. That's going to be the sticking point right there. Element number 4, whether Amazon's interference for an improper purpose or by improper means. Number 5, of course, resulting damage. So clearly Parler was damaged, but what was Amazon's interference for? Was it for a proper purpose or an improper purpose? Was it through proper means or improper means? And I think that is going to be the subject of a lot of debate. Amazon knows about the numbers. Parler is obviously severely damaged. And this is what they're asking for at the conclusion of the lawsuit. Plaintiff respectfully requests that the court grant Parler a temporary restraining order and order Amazon to maintain Parler's account until further notice from the court, and also to refrain from suspending, terminating, or failing to provide any services previously provided under Parler's customer agreement with AWS. They want Parler granted damages, including trebled damages in an amount to be determined at trial, grant Parler other such relief as the court deems just and proper. We got a verification signed off on by John Matzey, the CEO of Parler. So I think it's a pretty good claim, and I think that you're going to see a lot more of these claims because it does seem very vindictive. It seems like they are all colluding together. I think Donald Trump was kicked off Pinterest and Spotify, off everything. I mean, there was a literal change in the political tide. We saw last week, I think it was on Tuesday, 2 senators from the Democrats won the Democratic races or the Senate seats. Now they're going to be Democratic. The Senate is going to be majority Democrat next session, and they're going to be chairing a lot of the oversight committees. And as soon as the Democrats gain that power, we saw just the hammer come down. Twitter came out, looked for the first justification to boot Trump off. Then everybody else followed suit. Facebook did. Google did, Parler, everybody's just gone. It was a bloodbath. It was a massacre last week on Friday that extended into the weekend and into this week. And so we'll see where Parler's lawsuit goes. Now, as promised, we do have a supercut of all of the other statements. So what is Twitter complaining about? What are these big tech companies complaining about? Google was saying that Parler was inciting sort of violence or allowing problematic tweets to be on their platform, even though Twitter itself had Hang Mike Pence trending for a very long period of time. Google, same complaint. They booted Parler out of the App Store for the same stuff. And Trump got banned for the same types of claims. Trump was apparently inciting violence, incitement of violence, incitement of violence. We keep hearing that nonstop. That's even in the impeachment documents that are probably going to be voted on tomorrow. So it's all about this violence, and it all goes back to this tough language. It's this fight language. It's this provocative language that politicians use very regularly. It's part of politics. It's part of everyday life. If you want to bring energy in, when we have company meetings, what do we talk about? Fighting, winning, conquering. Okay, we don't go into court and just say, we're here to have a civil dialogue with the prosecutor and the cop who's charging our client with an unjustified crime. Let's talk. Let's sit down around a round table and just be friends. What are your feelings on this, Mr. Prosecutor? What are your feelings? Sometimes that stuff happens, but the majority of what we do is fighting, right? It's fighting, fighting, fighting. And so when we have to build momentum on our team, when we have to go out and win sports games, it's about crushing the competition. It's the same situation in politics. So to dogpile on the president for using some of the same language that a lot of these other politicians use on a regular basis and get away with no repercussions, in my mind, is one of the biggest double standards I've ever seen in my entire life. But it's politics, and that's just the nature of the game. So here is that supercut. Here is every single other politician using worse language, in my mind, than a lot of the same stuff Donald Trump has said. Let's go.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country. Maybe there will be.
People need to start taking to the streets. This is a dictator.
There needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
Enemies of the state.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
Do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless.
When they go low, we kick.
How do you resist the temptation to run up and wring her neck?
The biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized up to the right.
I thought he should have punched him in the face. I said, even if you lost, he insulted your wife.
Yes.
He came down the escalator and called Mexicans rapists and murderers. He said, well, what do you think I should have done? I said, I think you should have punched him in the face and then gotten out of the race. You would have been a hero.
I'd like to punch him in the face. I said if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
Punch some people in the face!
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump, and that's a fact.
Look as his character is stabbed to death.
Where is John Wilkes Booth when you need him?
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
A Missouri state senator is under investigation by the Secret Service after saying she hopes President Trump is assassinated.
I will go and take Trump out tonight.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
Right? Same stuff. So that clip is flying around. I did not make that clip. That came from a guy, somebody on Twitter called Altitude Chaz. Altitude, just like the word sounds, Chaz, C-H-A-Z. So go check that person out. That's where we got this clip from. But, some of them are politicians. Some of them are not. Some of them are the standard, liberal activists. Some of the, Hollywood crowd are in there talking about violence. It's the same people who today are saying that everything is terrorism and this is a coup and we need more civility and we need to ramp down on all of this, political language and we got to impeach the president and remove him, even though they've been using the same language against the president for a long time. There was the play where they were stabbing Donald Trump, murdering him. We've got the Snoop Dogg video where they're shooting him in the head. We've got, Johnny Depp, Madonna. We've got Richard De Niro, whatever the hell his name is. They are all using that type of language. That's okay if the violence is against Donald Trump. But as soon as Donald Trump starts to rally his base a little bit, now it's the end of the earth. It's the end of America. The whole country's melting down. There's nothing we can do about it. Let's go into hyperventilation mode. And it's just a double standard. So for all of the faux outrage out there, I just don't buy it, right? I understand what happened at the Capitol was problematic, but for the same people to come out and use that type of language in one context and then flip it and say that's inappropriate in a different context is just dishonest. It's intellectually dishonest, and nobody's calling them out on it. Sort of just getting a pass on this. There's a big rally to go slam dunk on the president when they use the same language very regularly. And that's just the sort of the Hollywood media type. You've also got Maxine Waters. You've got Nancy Pelosi. You've got Joe Biden also saying we're going to take him around the back and beat him. Right? He uses that type of language very regularly. And so it's also elected officials also using the same type of language. But everyone wants to get hysterical because Donald Trump was using the same type of language. Now, Donald Trump, when he used it, yes, something bad happened. The people who, a very small contingent of the people who heard his speech went and did some awful things. And we should analyze that. And it doesn't excuse what happened there. But to sort of just suddenly lump in every single bad thing that ever happens and tie that back to one politician's speech is just not fair. It's a double standard. And it's something that's just, I guess, it goes without comment. I mean, it just nobody's talking about it. Twitter is very upset because in Uganda, they're having elections. And in Uganda, they shut off the internet. Twitter, public policy, unhappy. They posted this today. Remember how much they're against violence and how much they're against the problematic things Donald Trump does. That's why they had to kick him off their platform. The sitting president of a country, along with a number of people who support the president, gone with the wind because they're concerned. But in Uganda, they want more transparency. They want more online activity, more freedom of speech, more freedom of expression. Here's what they posted today. This came out today. I was laughing my butt off when I saw this. Twitter public policy. They said, ahead of the Ugandan election, we're hearing reports that internet service providers are being ordered to block social media and messaging apps. We strongly condemn internet shutdowns. They are hugely harmful, violate basic human rights, and the principles of #open internet. Can you believe this nonsense? We strongly condemn internet shutdowns. They violate basic human rights. Earlier this week, in close coordination with our peers, we suspended a number of accounts targeting the election in Uganda. If we can attribute any of this activity to state-backed actors, we will disclose to our archive of information operations. Access to information and freedom of expression, including the public conversation on Twitter, is never more important than during democratic processes, particularly elections. It's good to be on the internet and have free expression, free information, democratic conversations if you're in Uganda, but not if you're in the United States, because it's too dangerous here. Donald Trump and his supporters are just total menaces across the board. All right, so what are people doing about this? Well, Randy Fine is a Florida House of Representative member, and he's sending a letter over to the governor there, Governor Ron Desantis. He says here, this morning, I asked the governor and the cabinet to divest the state from Amazon, Twitter, Apple, Google, and Facebook. They may get to decide who they do business with. So do we. He says, I write to ask you to order the immediate divestment of any Florida-held equity and debt of the following companies: Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, Apple, Alphabet, which is Google. Last week, the United States Capitol was one of the saddest days of my life as a young page, serving in the U.S. House 30 years ago, so on and so forth. Great, great, great. These terrorists defiled the sacred temple. I say this because those terrorists do not define me. They do not define you. They do not define my colleagues, and they do not define conservatives. I'm deeply disturbed about this. No matter what anyone thinks about the president, he remains the elected president. If the president of the U.S. can be silenced by these companies, so can anyone. It is clear that Twitter and Facebook are engaged in one-sided viewpoint discrimination, targeting conservatives. These companies allow actual terrorists around the world to use their platforms and to target America without as much as a peep. It is not disputed that they're all actively working to eliminate any alternative outlets where we can speak freely. Therefore, I do not dispute that as private companies, it is within their rights to choose who to do business with and not. We faced a similar issue a year ago with Airbnb. Now it is time to address this in Florida. Florida taxpayers should not be forced to do business with entities that censor them. You would be getting the same letter if it were liberal groups being silenced. In addition, I will be introducing legislation to forbid any state or local government from conducting any business with these companies effective July 1st of this year. No Facebook, Twitter, Google advertising by Florida governments, no use of Amazon services by any Florida government, no purchases of Apple or Android devices by any government agency. They may get to decide who they do business with. So do we. So cheers to Randy Fine on that. I think that is a good response, right? If they want to tell the people that they don't get to use their platforms because they don't like some people's political ideologies, the government has the ability to return the favor. And Randy Fine out of Florida, hat tip over to that fellow for standing up on that. All right, One last quick story we're going to get through. There was a execution that was scheduled, and then there was this sort of dramatic stay of that execution. So this is the woman. Her name is Lisa Montgomery, and she was the only woman on federal death row for a long period of time. And at the last minute, in a 5-4 ruling, there was a stay of her execution, which was supposed to be today. She was supposed to be executed today, but the D.C. Circuit Court said, nope, can't happen. Highly expedited hearing on the issues about law and federal death penalty procedures would push execution into the Biden administration, which may halt it. So this story was very gruesome, happened back in 2004. This was a murder kidnap scenario, and this was the situation. Well, let me read you the story. It comes from NBC News. Within only 1 hour, with only hours before the scheduled execution, a convicted murderer and the first woman to face the federal death penalty in nearly 7 decades, a federal judge late Monday put a temporary stop to it pending a mental competency review. So this is the woman here, and a date was not given. An attorney for her said that she suffers from severe mental illness that was exacerbated by the lifetime of sexual torture she suffered at the hands of caretakers. Psychiatric experts submitted affidavits as part of her appeal, claiming she is unable to understand the basis for her execution. She is, according to them, mentally deteriorating. We are seeking an opportunity to prove her incompetence. And this was the story. So in 2004, she was 36. She was living in Kansas, and she crossed state lines. She went over to Missouri to the home of a woman named Bobby Jo Stinnett. She met at a dog show, and this is when it got, really, really bad. Stinnett was 8 months pregnant at the time, and Montgomery killed her and took her baby out of her womb, and then took that baby back home, and was basically going to try to keep it as her own. Police came. They, obviously they took the baby back. They found Miss Stinnett, who was dead at the time, and then they arrested Miss Montgomery, and she had a trial. She was convicted, and of course sentenced to death. And so she's been incarcerated at a all-female federal prison in Fort Worth for a long time. The staff there is trained to deal with mental health issues. Her lawyer says they aren't arguing that she didn't deserve to be punished, but rather that the severe mental illness was something that should basically save her life, right? Make sure that she's not executed. And for a long time, I've been very against the death penalty. I think it's going to be considered one of the most barbaric things that we do 20 years from now, when the human race sort of evolves past the current punitive ideology of what our justice system should be, and we start thinking about rehabilitative types of justice, when we start thinking about how can we help people recover from their past traumas, heal them as full people, rather than treating them like sacks of meat and throwing them through a justice grinder that makes them worse and punishes them in a way that is not useful for society. And we're going to look back on this time of over-incarceration, mass incarceration, and I think we're going to be very disgusted with ourselves, and rightfully so. So I've been against the death penalty for a very long time. I think that innocent people have been executed in this country. Don't think it happens often, but it does happen. And it's just not something that I think is morally acceptable. And I'm not real sure that what it does to help people, get over their loss. And I don't need to get into any of that stuff, but this was an interesting case, right? And we're going to see, I sort of diverge from a lot of more conservative people, even though I hate taxes and I don't like the government so much. I diverge from a lot of conservatives on this issue because many conservatives are pro-death penalty. They're pro-punitive justice. They're pro-private prisons. They're pro, punish, and I just don't agree with that. So when I see something like this come up, I say, okay, maybe we're moving in the right direction on some of this stuff. And if we move into the Biden administration, and I see some of the death penalty activism sort of cut out, I'd be happy about that. And I would be very, I would commend the Biden administration on that, truthfully, because I think this is a problem. This comes from the U.S. Court of Appeals, September term. This was filed on January 11th, so yesterday. It is ordered on the court's own motion that the court's January 11th, 2021 order denying the motion for a stay be reconsidered, and that the appellant's motion for stay of the execution pending the hearing be granted. A majority of the en banc court has determined that the appellant has satisfied the stringent requirements to stay the matter. On the court's own motion, the merits of the appeal will be heard en banc on a highly expedited basis. So they're going to grant a hearing to determine whether, or the important question of the meaning of implementation of death in the manner prescribed by the law of the state in which the sentence is imposed. So they're going to be sort of dialing in and seeing, how this is going to work under the Federal Death Penalty Act. They've got a number of different briefs that are due by January 19th, January 26th, January 29th, and so on and so forth. The parties should be informed, look at all the internal procedures and so on. And so just an interesting story. You don't often see sort of a last minute, supposed to be executed today, late yesterday, got a halt on that order. So we're going to continue to see where that goes. All right, let's jump into the super chats. And we're going to start off with Turd Ferguson. Felony murder require being an accomplice / co-conspirator plus the mens rea to all commit the underlying felonious act. So all protesters conspired. So Turd, yeah. So it's sort of a. I don't know what the specific language of the statute that they would be using is. So, this would be federal charges, and I would have to look at the specific language of that statute. But yeah, generally it's sort of a common scheme, I think, is what a lot of the case law says about it. It's a common scheme that they're all working together in collusion towards one ultimate ends. And so if you can make the argument, I think, both ways. If all of the protesters were, sort of conspiring to get into the Capitol building and somebody got shot as a result of that, and those were all felonies of breaking into the Capitol building during a government proceeding, then I think you could make the argument that everybody who is a part of that common scheme should be, or at least the scope of felony murder would extend into them, right? It would cover their cases. But you could also make a converse argument. You could say, well, no, this wasn't part of a common scheme. They were all part of the same rally. They were all there to see the president. They were all there to support the electoral cause. But once the sort of the mobbing of the Capitol building occurred, then individuals were acting within their own groups. They weren't going in there with one common scheme to go overthrow the government. They weren't going in there to all hang Mike Pence. There may have been, one subset of the big set that was part of that. And so you would then narrow the scope of the felony murder doctrine into that small subset. And you would say, nope, only that group of people are part of that common scheme. And then that would be the mens rea that you're talking about there. So the underlying felonious act for that group would be they wanted to go and do damage to the vice president. But the grander mens rea would be just wanted to get into the building, right? The guilty mind, the only culpable mental state that they had was to get into the Capitol building. Whereas, let's say Ashley Babbitt and her group, they wanted to break into the Senate chamber and arguably go after a sitting House member or a sitting Senate person. And in that case, you would sort of narrow the scope down to within that contingent, not the entire group at large. Very good question, Turd. You asked me some legal questions. I got to do some legal analysis on those. Question for Robert. Felony murders, the hand of one is the hand of all. Legal theory and SCOTUS precedent is worryingly broad in its scope. But do you see this theory playing a hand in the murder of Officer Sicknick? Will the people in his immediate area be charged with aiding in his death, or will only the people that directly assaulted Officer Sicknick potentially be charged with felony murder? Good question. Very similar to Turd's question. So I do think that this is sort of prosecutorial discretion, right? A prosecutor can make a case that they think that they can win. If they think that they have enough video footage to implicate other people who are sort of in that vicinity, that they were cheering on the people who were actually doing the damage. And one of the videos that I saw, I don't know if this was Officer Sicknick specifically, but it was an officer on the ground and people were just hitting him over the head with American flags and all sorts of problems. And there was another group of people who were sort of behind them, and they weren't doing anything to stop that, right? They weren't pulling them off. They weren't helping the officer. And so you could make the argument that they were part of that. They were within the scope of that broad felony murder doctrine. But, conversely, you could make the argument that they weren't, right? That only the people who were actually doing the hitting, only the people who were engaged in the act of violence should be responsible under felony murder, although that would be more like attempted murder or actual murder, right? If they're actually hitting the person on the head, they're sort of outside of the bounds of the felony murder doctrine, just because they don't need that. They don't need to implicate them through a related felony. They've got the evidence that they were hitting them and doing the damage directly. So a lot of this is prosecutorial discretion. It's going to be up to what the U.S. Attorney's Office wants to do with it. And we don't know yet. We're going to see how far they take it. But they certainly could make the argument that it is very, very broad. All right, thank you. We have another one from Beth. Says, good evening. I think that the impeachment attempt is going to divide the party. They are off to a bad start. Yeah, I just read a headline, I don't know how true this is, from the New York Times that said that Mitch McConnell is interested in pursuing impeachment. We'll see how that plays out for him. I don't think it's going to go well. Good to see you, Beth. Thanks for being here. We have another one from Ron B. Former Senator of California, Barbara Boxer, registered and deregistered as a foreign agent for the CCP. Biden also took money from Boxer for campaign funds. Thoughts? So it will be very curious to see what some of those relationships look like. I think that there's probably a lot there. There's probably a lot of baggage there. Biden has been in office for a long time. He's got a lot of relationships with a lot of people. He's got a lot of family members doing a lot of curious, questionable things. And I don't think that they were properly investigated prior to the election. I think it was a political whitewash. They wanted to just throw that stuff all under the rug. And we didn't get to see what actually is there. So once they open up that box and they peek inside, we may be very curious as what is there. We have another one from Paula MK85 says, I read in the Epic Times that many world leaders, including liberal ones, who don't like Trump are very against big tech censorship of him. Do you think that may have an effect on what BT is doing, what big tech is doing? So, I'm not real sure what big tech's strategy is here. I think that it's just political. I mean, I really do. I don't know that there is let me back that up a little bit. So there is this trend in big corporations that I think many people are sort of missing. A lot of the big corporations are taking hard stands moving forward. Okay. And the biggest example of this is Nike, right? Nike went all in with the guy who was kneeling at the show. I can't remember his name right now, but he was sort of the face of this whole thing. And what they're doing is they're going all in on that. They're saying, this is our brand now. There's a book called Your Stand is Your Brand by a guy named Patrick Gentempo. It's a good book. And he talks about this, that, sort of the future of a lot of businesses and corporations are going to be all about taking a strong stand. And you'd rather have a smaller customer base of very excited individuals who are very in alignment with what your passion is than a bigger audience or bigger customer base of less engaged individuals. And so that's why you see Nike, for example, going one route. You see even some of the other athletic companies, what's Lululemon, right? They're very into, they're taking a stand on mental health and mental wellness and love your body no matter what size and all of that stuff, right? They're taking a hard stand. Nike's done it. Lululemon's doing it. Now you're seeing it with some of these big tech companies. Facebook's going to be doing it, or already doing it. Twitter's doing it. Amazon's doing it. And so it's sort of like this politicization of commerce throughout the country. And some of that's good. Some of that's not so good. And here we're seeing that with these big tech companies. It's also troubling, though, because a lot of different world leaders and a lot of other countries use this stuff, use their platforms in a way that is very important to the infrastructure of their countries, right? Donald Trump was not the only politician who used Twitter. Many other countries use it. Many other politicians use it. And the fact that they can be silenced so quickly at the hands of some big tech, bros over in Silicon Valley is concerning to them. Right? If you're the president of one country and you use Twitter primarily to communicate with your constituents, they can just shut you off at any given moment. That's troubling. Donald Trump sets a bad precedent. I think Angela Merkel said something about it, as did a number of others. And so, we got to keep that in mind. Now, the question then on big tech's behalf is, how is this profitable for them? If Florida is going to be trying to divest all of their assets from big tech, if a number of people are just sort of boycotting, canceling their stuff, alternative platforms are going to crop up at some point, they're going to have to know that competition is coming. So, why are they doing this? In my mind, it's just political. It's sort of their bubble. They live in this big tech bubble where they're all extremely liberal and they all hate Donald Trump. And in order to be, in good favor at the cocktail parties, they all have to be on the same side. And I think that's ultimately what it amounts to. Now, I don't know if there's if they've had a conversation about how this is going to impact profits or how that's going to work. I would imagine they have. They've got duties to their stockholders, but I just don't know how this makes them a stronger company in the long run. I don't think it's a good move. I don't think it's right for America. I mean, I'm a huge proponent of free speech. I think that what we're seeing with big tech is very, very troubling across the board. Good question, Paula MK. Thank you. We have Kenny 1B said, did Pelosi violate 18 U.S. Code 2837 by attempting to interfere with the Presidential Nuclear Command Authority? Profound violation of civilian control of nuclear employment principle established in the Atomic Energy Act. So Kenny 1B, I don't know what 2837 under Title 18 is in the U.S. Code off the top of my head. But from the context of your question, I think you're going to be talking about sort of, sedition or a coup or something to that effect. Because what Nancy Pelosi did, I think, is very close to that. I think it's closer to that than anything that Donald Trump did. I just do. I mean, she went over to the Joint Chiefs and specifically said, hey, I'm trying to divest the lawful powers of a legally duly elected president away from him without going through a legal mechanism. Not the 25th Amendment, not, no impeachment. They're trying to remove powers from him without removing him from office. That is the definition of a coup. Right? She's literally going and trying to usurp the president's ability to be the president. Whether you think that's good or not, there are rules in place when a president is not performing well. It's called the 25th Amendment. The vice president invokes the amendment and then talks to all the Joint Chiefs, and they implement a plan. That didn't happen. This was one branch of government encroaching on another branch of government, unjustified. And I think it's a problem. Truthfully, if they impeach President Trump, I would have no issues with just a whole slew of other impeachments against all these other politicians, because they've all said very gross things. Just played a clip of it. And they've also done stuff here that I think is a breach of the law, a breach of the rule. And, think about when you're a kid, right? And you're on the schoolyard and somebody punches somebody else. Nobody liked that kid who got punched, but the first kid who punched the bad kid, it wasn't right. But you don't like the kid who got punched, so you don't say much about it because he probably deserved it, even though the punch was not right? It was a sucker punch, shouldn't have thrown it. But because the person who got hit is disfavored, you kind of let that one slide. It's still wrong, right? It's still wrong. You can't sort of operate outside the social norms or the political norms or the legal norms just because you don't like the guy. What Pelosi did was a violation of the law, in my opinion of it. I think it was politically unjustified. I don't think that there was a basis for it. And are there going to be any repercussions for it? Probably not. But if they want to impeach Trump on made up stuff, then why don't the Republicans impeach them either? I'll tell you why. It's because the political winds are blowing hard at the sails of the Democrats, and the Republicans are scared out of their boots. Good question, Kenny 1B. Thank you. Sharon Quidney says, okay, so last summer's mayhem, cities burning, etc., get a pass like it was justifiable, while Trump supporters get the book thrown at them. Yep, that's right. That's right, because the Democrats have more tools in their toolbox. They've got the media. They've got a lot of spineless Republicans who are just quivering right now and accepting all of the blame that is being dumped on them, even though I don't think it's all justified. Certainly there are problems. Certainly this country can do better, but it's not an equal playing field at all. Double standards across the board, including the Capitol Hill riots versus BLM. Good to see you, Sharon. Another one from Sharon. Nope, that was two. Nope, got that one. All right, so we got another one from Beth Coddington, and she says, a Japanese reporter has a video showing one of the agitators in the building going down the steps and changing clothes. Another has one breaking glass on doors, and then later, as a witness, talking to the press. Wow, that's interesting. I have not seen that video. I would like to see that there. Beth, if you have that, I'd like to see it, because that sounds like something that was highly orchestrated, right? Maybe there was a group that was more organized than we know. The FBI said that they had some information about it. We just don't know yet. Like, who are these groups? How are they made up? If these are terrorist cells, who are they? Where did they come from? What are their mission? What's their mission? What are their goals? All would be good to know. We have another one from S. Love, who says, I wrote about this before. I have a video of a man at the very start of the march yelling over a megaphone, trying to get people to rush the Capitol. So I'd be curious as who that is also, S-Love. A lot of videos coming out. Apparently the FBI got a couple 100,000 videos, or at least 100,000 sent to them, and they're asking for more. So there's going to be a lot more video that comes out. We're going to learn more and more over the coming months, as they have said. Another one from Beth. Is that 3 from Beth? Thanks, Beth. Beth Coddington says, I have 2 sisters who are all in with the media. They believe everything and refuse to hear another side. I fear it will interfere with our relationship. Not on my part, but they are so self-righteous. It's very sad. It is sad. You know, I've experienced this in my life also. I have some people who I'm close with who are just totally on the other political planet. I mean, not even in the same wheelhouse. They just don't think particularly critically, and they're okay with that. And, you know, it's one of those things that you just leave it alone. You know, I leave it alone for myself. I just don't try to get into it with them. If they bring it up and they say, "Did you see what Trump did?" You know, and they want to get into it, I just say, "No, I didn't see it." And they start talking about it, and I just say, "Well, it's best that we don't talk about that stuff," right? I mean, let's save that. How was your day? How's work? How are your kids? How's your family? What else is going on? We don't need to get into that agitation mode, because people want to do that, right? It makes them feel good. I know a lot of people in my life who are not, you know, I would say they're political observers, like almost like a sports team. You know, they want to talk about politics, not because they're going to do anything about it, not because they're going to go run for office or vote differently, or, you know, even introduce a good new argument. They just want to vent, and they just want to feel good. And some of that righteous anger feels good, right? You turn on the news and I can't believe that Biden's doing this. You turn into the Hulk, and it kind of feels good. You kind of get that energy. And I talk about this. This is the pellet. This is you just pressing that pellet all day, just going, "Oh, give me another one of those. Give me another hit. Give me another hit. I need that anger." And that's not good for anybody. And so when it comes to your family members and they're trying to push your buttons to get that pellet from you, just say, "Hey, I'm out. I don't have any of that stuff." You're right. Trump's a moron. The whole country's over. Got it. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Next story. Let's talk about the important stuff. Let's talk about my family. Let's talk about your kids. Let's talk about your charity. Are you doing anything good for the world? Let's talk about those issues. You leave that other stuff aside. And it's been useful for me. And I think it kind of irritates them a little bit also, because you won't engage with them. So you have a little bit of a victory also, as well. Thanks, Beth. Another one from S. McKay says, would you defend someone involved in the Capitol Hill riot if they are being charged and they wanted to hire you? Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely, I would. Yeah, I mean, I think everybody deserves a defense. I think that due process is important. I think that the founding principle of this country is you're innocent until proven guilty. We've got a lot of different amendments. We've got a lot of rules of law in our constitutional case precedent that supports that for very good reason. And so I can represent individuals charged with crimes, even though I don't endorse what they do, because I believe in the system. I believe in innocence until proven guilty. I believe in due process. I believe in fair representation and the bigger concepts of justice in general. So I'd be happy to represent somebody who has been charged with a crime like that. I don't think that we will, because we're in Arizona, but certainly, right? Everybody deserves a defense. Even people who've done the most heinous types of crimes, they still deserve due process, innocence until proven guilty, and a fair trial. And if you don't have very good defense attorneys who are willing to take those cases, if you just say, well, nope, I'm only going to represent people charged with DUIs and domestic violence, but not these heinous crimes, because I just can't endorse that. Well, in my mind, that's kind of weak. It's kind of a weak defense attorney, right? Everybody deserves a defense in my mind, and it doesn't matter really what they've done. There needs to be a proper defense, because if you don't have anybody willing to take those cases, those people just languish without representation, or bad representation, or subpar representation, and the defense is the only check on the government power. Okay, we want equal scales of justice. If you have a prosecutor that has all of the defense and everything over here, everything's weighed towards their side, and you don't have a good defense attorney over here, then the government's going to get away with whatever they want to, because no one is holding them accountable. Nobody's challenging them on the other end, and we certainly don't want that. Good question, S. McKay. We have Me Thompson says, if you are curious, go to Epic Times, search for John Sullivan, watch the full video +2 by Crossroads about Ashley Barrett and Michael Young. I will do that, Me Thompson. I think I am a premium member to the Epic Times, so I will go check them out. I just have not seen those, so thank you for bringing them to my attention. Liberty or Death says, if you are going to commit a crime, do not take a picture of you committing it. And if you do take a picture, do not post it to social media. Pro tip. Very, very astute observation there, Liberty or Death. Not a good idea to do that. Not a good idea to do that. Not a good idea to talk to anybody about the crime either. And when the cops call, not a good idea to just spill your guts to them either, right? Contact an attorney. Let the attorney do the talking. You don't talk about it anymore. Oh, man, some of these cases are going to be tough for them. All right, last one. It's a light day on the Super Chats, but that's all right. We've got Me Thompson says, didn't one of Sydney's cases make it to the Supreme Court today? Does it matter anymore? No, it doesn't matter in my mind. It doesn't matter at all. I mean, it matters in the context of figuring out what happened with the election. I think Sidney Powell made some interesting claims. I would like to see what happens with those claims. Largely, what I've been saying for a long time here is that I'm curious about some of the constitutional claims. How does the Supreme Court view an executive branch modifying rules that a legislature put into power or put in place for running an election? Or how does the Supreme Court handle a state Supreme Court changing the rules because of COVID at the last minute to modify the election rules? I'm curious about those questions, and some of those questions were in Ms. Powell's suits and many other suits, so I would still like answers to those. But when you ask, does it matter in the context of, is it going to change the course of the election? No, it's done. The election's over. On January 7th, which is when they finally counted the electoral votes, that was it. They read Joe Biden's name into the Congressional Journal. That was it. That's all she wrote. So we'll see. I did see that the Supreme Court brought in or dismissed or refused to grant certiorari, meaning they didn't accept the cases for a long period of time, or they just dismissed like 13 of them. So I think the Supreme Court is largely going to be hands off, and we're not going to get many answers from them. But the election's over. Joe Biden's going to be inaugurated on the 20th. I know that is disappointing to a lot of people, but those are the rules. All right, and so Miss Faith is saying we've got some more, but I do not see any more. Where are they? 1 second. Let's take a quick look. And we can just go on over to the YouTube channel itself. Apologies, folks. Okay, my PowerPoint is not updating. Give me 1 second. Don't know why. Let me pause for a quick moment. Let me see if I have the wrong PowerPoint open. All right, so she's just going to send them to me in a different format. So let's go through. All right, we have another one. So I'm not going to be able to put these on the screen. I apologize, but this one comes from Aaron Borth, who says, maybe the podium guy is going just for trespass, and to avoid seditious conspiracy, the FBI has a task force. So maybe the podium guy is just going for trespass and avoid seditious conspiracy. The FBI has a task force. Yeah, that's a good point there. So that comes from Andrew Borth. And that's sort of where I was going with that. You know, he may be trying to negotiate a good plea deal so you would acknowledge that you did something wrong, but maybe not the other things wrong. You know, yes, I was in there. Yes, I had the podium. Yes, I was doing all this stuff, but I wasn't trying to overthrow the government. I wasn't trying to commit treason. You know, this wasn't a part of a coup. And so you can fall on the sword on some charges and argue against the other ones. And by just going in there and just saying open and close, you got me on that charge, but not the other ones, that may be a good strategy as well. We have a couple others coming in from, don't know what's going on with our PowerPoints today. We have another one. Oh, we've got a bunch more coming in. Let me see if I can just, nope, I can't really do much with that. All right, another one from Mazier Gorbani says, I am Iranian and I supported Trump for his maximum pressure policy on the regime. This has given people a fighting chance. Will Biden do the same? Maximum? No, I don't think so. I mean, in Iran, we had the whole Iranian deal between Obama and Iran, and then Trump came in and sort of put the kibosh on that, and then Biden is coming in, which is basically Obama term 3. So he's probably just going to go back to whatever Obama was doing. So Mazier, if you're not particularly happy with what the Obama administration was doing, probably going to see that again. All right, so Miss Faith is now opening up. Hold on one second. We're trying to troubleshoot on the fly. I'm not sure what happened here. We're going to open up this PowerPoint in a web browser, and we're going to wait for that to load so that we can get down to the super chats. All right, look at this. We got something figured out here. So Mazier Gorbani, thank you for that. We have another one from Elise Fossey, says, could reports of potential violence in the U.S. capitals pre-inauguration be attempts by the left to frame Trump supporters with the goal to generate more hatred / banning as a strategy to help eradicate MAGA? So yes, I think so. Absolutely. I think that there is, I haven't seen any evidence of this, right? We haven't seen any evidence that there is this grand scheme to go in and label all Trump supporters as terrorists. Like, we haven't seen a conspiracy theory. Who's the person behind all that? We don't know yet, but certainly, I mean, I think you're seeing a dogpile across the media that anybody who shows up, anybody who even supports Donald Trump anymore is a terrorist. You're seeing people kicked off planes. You're seeing people lose their jobs. You're seeing, people deplatformed just across the internet. And I think that there is a little bit of momentum here to say, all right, not only are we going to remove Trump from office, but we're going to just crush the entire movement. And so anybody who's associated with him is just jumping ship. Trump doesn't even have the PGA Tour at one of his golf courses. They canceled that. And I think one of the banks closed his bank accounts. I mean, everybody's trying to just clamp down on this stuff across the board. So I think that the more you can tie all of Trump's supporters to what happened on Capitol Hill that particular day, the better it is politically for the Democrats, right? You want to take your competition and marginalize them. If MAGA is a big, powerful movement and you can make the rest of America think that MAGA is the Capitol Hill rioters, it's the same thing. They're one and the same. They're two peas in a pod. Then that serves the Democrat agenda, right? Because anybody who is within MAGA who has some voice or some power now becomes marginalized because they've been associated with something that America, generally speaking, has contempt for. So it's a good point, Elise. Thank you for that. We have another one from Seiji Takahari, who says, so who defends these people? Like, is this actually a case of something indefensible, or are we being intellectually lazy by condemning entirely? So who defends these people? Defense attorneys do. I mean, defense attorneys will, and that one attorney's approach is not going to be the same as every other attorney's approach, right? Other attorneys would never go in there and admit anything, right? They would not even concede on identification. They wouldn't concede on anything. No stipulations across the board. You make the government prove every single point of their case, every single element you contest, every single rule violation, every single T that is not crossed in a police report, every error, you just capitalize on that. And so that's one strategy, sort of a scorched earth strategy. And the other one, if you got a really bad case and there's nothing you can do, is sort of what you saw with this guy, right? You just go in, kind of fall on the sword, beg for mercy, and do what you can to mitigate the charges. Very good question from Saji. We have the Wandering Mariner. Do you think some of the people will plea their case with an admittance that the president told them to storm the Capitol, assisting impeachment? That's a great question, Wandering Mariner. I had not thought about that. Very, very, very interesting question. Excellent. The best question. Such a good question. So here's one way that this can go down. If you have a clever prosecutor, I don't even like to give this idea out. Maybe they're already thinking this way. But here's what happens. When you take a plea deal on a criminal case, you have to admit to a certain set of facts. You have to go into court and acknowledge facts, right? If you go in and you say, Judge, your attorney says, all right, Judge, we're going to be pleading guilty to this shoplifting charge. Judge will ask the attorney for what's called a factual basis, or they call it different things in different jurisdictions, like a statement of facts or a soliloquy or a number of different things to call it. But it's a statement of facts. What happened? And so sometimes you can be very vague about it, and you can say, hey, well, Your Honor, about the date in question, my client was in a Walmart, and there was a piece of property that they wanted. They were not able to afford it, so they put that property in their purse. They left the premises without paying for the property. This all happened in the city of Scottsdale within the state of Arizona, and that's the facts, right? Pretty simple. And the judge will go, okay, good. Thank you. And he'll ask the client, do you agree with that set of facts? Perfect, right? So that set of facts is now memorialized in a court document, and that is part of the plea deal. What you'll see in some situations, in more complicated situations, let's say you've got two defendants who are arguing about what to do or who is responsible for what. So now let's say we're talking about this theft, and you have one defendant who says, I didn't steal it, and another defendant who says, no, I didn't steal it, and they're both pointing their fingers at each other, right? Well, what the government can do is they'll say, all right, we're going to give person A a very good plea deal, but one of the facts that they have to agree to is they got to point their finger at person B. And so they'll sort of use that plea deal to sort of, push that person B into a losing position. So they'll say, okay, well, person A, one of your facts is that you said that person B did it. So now we're going to call you at a trial. If person B doesn't accept a plea deal, that's going to be harsher than yours because we're going to give you a smoking deal for ratting on person B. Then we go to trial. Person A, you got to come to trial and testify against person B. So they'll put those facts in that plea deal in a way to implicate somebody else. So here, what the Wandering Mariner is hinting at is that maybe as part of the plea deals, a lot of these protesters implicate the president, right? The prosecutor says in the plea deal, if I'm going to give you this smoking deal, you're going to have to acknowledge that the president was the one who incited you to come do this stuff. Blame the president. Don't blame your colleagues. Don't blame anything else. Don't blame, QAnon. Don't blame the Proud Boys. Blame the president. And then they may want to take that and use that as evidence against the president in an impeachment trial. Very clever. That would be very interesting. I think you may actually see that now that I think about it. Excellent question, the Wandering Mariner. That is a fun one. Turd Ferguson says, digital censorship is yet another rules for thee but not for me mentality. If you accept bake the cake doctrine, you can't honestly defend big tech with no first A protection, my private company. Yeah, so this is a good point, right? If you have, you can kind of come at this from two angles. If it's a private company and they're free to do whatever they want, then why are they suing the baker for not baking a cake? That doesn't make any sense. And we're talking about the left generally, right? These are sort of left lawsuits. And they're suing the baker for not baking a cake for a gay wedding. That has been the arguments before, right? A baker has some religious ideals, and they don't want to endorse through their baking of a cake a gay cake. All right. They get sued because they're saying, well, that's discrimination. All right. So on the other side, then you have the same people who are making that very argument who go in and now they say, well, Twitter is just a private company. They can do whatever the hell they want. Leave them alone. And I think there are a lot of questions about that. So my concept here is that I think that there should be sort of a new version of digital civil rights. And I think that would address some of these underlying issues. And I'm going to continue to explore that concept, and I may put together a separate video about that. So yeah, I would agree. You can't defend big tech if you say the baker has to bake a cake, but big tech can do whatever they want. They're conflicting arguments. Thanks, Turd. Good to see you. We have Seiji Takahari says, are those people idiots, or is that a projection? Is it possible that they were the smartest people in the world and there is a perfectly good reason? It is possible. It is possible. But I don't know how you build a defense around that. So if you say that your client was somebody who knew exactly what they were doing, if you say, yeah, he knew what he was doing. He went in there, he knew he shouldn't have been there, and he picked up that podium, and he just walked out the door, and he was totally cognizant of everything that he was doing, you can't defend that, right? You have to sort of attack the underlying mental state. It's called mens rea. What is the culpable mental state? Are they guilty? Do they have a guilty mind or not? Are they caught up in a rally, a rant, or I'm sorry, like a frat party? Are they out there just having a good time? They got caught up in the emotion, or is this person somebody who knew what they were doing and they intentionally went in and tried to steal a podium? One is useful, one is not so much. One you can at least make some arguments for, the other you can't. And so when I say idiots, it's not to be condescending, but it's a characterization of the mentality that people who are not idiots normally were at the moment. Okay, they were idiots on January 6th from about 12:45 to 6 p.m. A lot of morons out there. When they go home, I'm sure they're not morons. I'm sure they're not idiots. I'm sure a lot of them are respectable people. Most of them are respectable, good people with good jobs. They just want their country to operate in a way that they feel is just and legitimate. And so they had a temporary break from reality. They got caught up in a bunch of emotion and they were acting like idiots. So maybe I should be a little bit more clear with my language. They were acting like idiots, but they weren't necessarily idiots, right? And it's just about characterizing them in a way that I think is more in alignment with the reality. I watched a lot of videos. There was one wave that was very aggressive and very violent, but then after that, for a number of hours, it was just sort of like people just walking through and meandering, through the place. And it's hard to say that they're all part of the same, they're all cut from the same cloth, because they're not. It's two different types of people. We have George Katsanakis, who says, a lot of prophets still say Trump will be president come January 20th. What will the Insurrection Act do? Nothing. So I don't think that the insurrection, thank you for the question, George. I know a lot of people are still saying that. It's not a reality. I've never seen anything recently about the Insurrection Act or about signing it or what he intends to do with that. According to our Constitution, I didn't write it. It's a pretty damn good document. The rules are what the rules are. They're not going to be changed just because people don't like the outcome. On January 6th, Joe Biden was nominated or formalized into the presidency on January 7th, more specifically. Soon as those votes were counted, as soon as Mike Pence read him into the congressional journals, that was it. That was the end of the game. Only thing that can happen to change that is Biden resigns. He's not president. Then we have Kamala Harris. There's nothing that we can do to put Trump in office at this point in time because the election's over. It's been decided. And he can resign. He can be impeached if the Democrats and the Republicans wanted to impeach him for some reason. But that's it. So I don't think the Insurrection Act does much of anything. Good question. MJ says the email sent to Parler was leaked to the press an hour before Parler even received such notice. Things that make you go, yeah. I would agree. Yeah, I agree, MJ. And I did see at least a hint of that, right? It sort of shows some bias, some malfeasance. This is not just a strict business decision. This is about a political deplatforming because of the fact that they're being so vocal and public about it. It's a PR decision more than a business decision. It's a sort of anti-competitive decision more than a legitimate underlying business decision. And the fact that they're spamming that stuff to the media, I think, supports that. James Hadd says, big tech and the media colluding with leftist politicians to oppress conservatives across the board will inevitably lead to the next Nichols and McVeigh. I really, really, really hope not. I'm not endorsing that at all, but I understand your point there, James. We got to be careful when we talk about violence, and we got to be careful when we talk about what they're doing that is going to lead to violence and sort of use that as a justification, because that's how it sounds. As soon as you say, well, they're silencing us, there's nowhere else to go. They're forcing us to become violent. It's dangerous because now it's sort of saying that you're excusing that violence. I know that's not what you're saying, but that's how a lot of the people are going to pick that up. And so if you're going to be talking about these issues, you got to be very clear that you're not endorsing that. But I understand your point, and I've been saying this for months now. I've been saying that by telling 74 million Americans who have questions about the election to sit down, shut up, close your mouth, don't even question it anymore, you're going to be isolating them. I call this a pressure cooker, right? They're putting all of these people into a pressure cooker with no release valve. Now, look, you've already taken away people's jobs, their freedom to go do certain things, right? Many people can't travel. Many people can't afford anything. People are, Arizona's pretty much open, but in other parts of the country, my understanding is it's total lockdown still. California, New York, all in different places. So you're stripping people of their ability to earn an income and provide for their families. You're taking away what they feel is their democratic expression by banning Parler and by banning, the president off of Twitter. You're taking away even more pressure relief valves from the pressure cooker. What do you think is going to happen? It's not a good recipe. This is not good for the country. I've said for a long time that more speech that is brought out into the marketplace of ideas is better for the country. Even if they're Klan members or KKK or Proud Boys or whomever it is, it doesn't matter. We want those people on the platforms for several reasons. One, so we know who they are. So we know what they're talking about. What are they saying? Who's following them? But also so we can refute their ideas so that when they come onto Twitter and they say insane, racist, nonsensical stuff, other people can say, that's insane and nonsensical. That's not connected to reality. If you remove them from that conversation and you put them in their own little bubble, their own pressure cooker, you're going to get a bad outcome. I'm praying that doesn't happen because we already had one bad outcome and look what happened. Big tech consolidated amongst themselves to silence an entire political wing. An entire ideology is gone. If we have more violence, what do you think is going to happen next? It's not good for anybody. Good question, James. Curtis Bartle says, did Trump lose the Insurrection Act when he signed that bill the Dems wanted? I'm not sure. Oh, I'm not sure what bill you're talking about there, Curtis. It may be the omnibus spending bill. That was a big bill that Trump signed, and I'm not sure that had anything about the Insurrection Act in it. I'm not real sure what people are thinking that Trump is going to do with the Insurrection Act. I don't think that is really a thing. I know it's a lot of people, it's sort of like the last hurrah. People, oh, this is it. Like, this is what he can use to reverse all of this. I just don't see that. Another one from Turd Ferguson. He says, great part about impeachment is that all of this material is fair game and made part of the public record. Wonder about calling reps and senators as witnesses to confirm they said those words regarding Trump and BLM. Yeah, so, and Turd sent a good message, I think, over to Miss Faith, sort of fleshing out a little bit about that, about this idea that if they do impeach Donald Trump and he gets a trial in the Senate, well, that's great, right? We can talk a lot about this evidence, and you can call people into the Senate under oath, and you can, call witnesses and present evidence and cross-examine evidence and have a trial. Right? It's going to be a political trial, but it's still a trial. And Turd was saying, well, maybe we can get these people on the record. Maybe we can play their own statements. Maybe take that supercut that the Altitude Chaz guy put together and show that to the American people, right? Show these massive double standards that exist, and maybe that will awaken people from some of their slumber. Good to see you, Turd. Thank you for all of the tremendous support. MJ says, well, I hope that tweet will bite their own arses as evidence of their bias. You would hope. It won't. I mean, I really don't know how they sit in their office and write those tweets with a straight face. How can you do that? How can you sit there and just say, last week on Friday, 4 days ago, they deleted the president of the United States off of the internet. And then their brothers over at Amazon deleted the competitor to them where the president would go, and they write a new tweet saying that they support an open internet and free expression, especially when it comes to democracies. You're going, guys, I don't know how they justify that, but talk about goodness, cognitive dissonance on a massive level. We got another one from Isaac Castillo. Says, happy Tuesday, Robert. Happy Tuesday to you, my friend. It's going to be a good week. I think we've got a lot of activity. I'm glad that you're here. Thanks for the support and the nice message. Another one from the Wandering Mariner says, Rob, I agree about capital punishment. Read about the one and only death penalty carried out in Wisconsin. It's interesting. I will take a look at that. Yeah, I'll be happy to take a look at that. Yeah, Wisconsin. One and only death penalty carried out in Wisconsin. So sounds like they're pretty against the death penalty over there. which is not a bad thing. Sharon Quidney says, Rob, thank you for your remarks on the death penalty. I am also against the death penalty. It's horrible, uncivilized, and cruel. I agree. I think 20 years from now, we're going to know a little bit more about what goes on in here. We're going to know a lot more about trauma. We're going to know that the people in our societies who do the, quote, bad things or act out in ways that are not, are sort of outside the bounds of what we in society consider to be acceptable, we're going to know that many of those people were abused themselves. They've got mental deficiencies. They've got genetic problems or something, right? There's the human being is very complicated. The human mind is complicated. We all have a lot of trauma in our lives and a lot of baggage from our history and a lot of terrible upbringings and problems that we've experienced. And sometimes that just spills out into society. And what we want to do to help society is to help that person. We want to help that person become rehabilitated, become whole, deal with that trauma, become a better person so that when they come out of the justice system, we as a society are benefited by having them back, not worse off. If we put them in a prison and beat the hell out of them and turn them into just a ground bag of meat, and then try to integrate them back into society, we as a society then have to support them and do all of these things to make sure that they don't drop dead. And it's a big expense. It's a humanitarian catastrophe. It's not good. So our justice system needs some major improvement. Thanks, Sharon. Another one from Salty Scotch says, I truly enjoy your commentary on what's going on. Thank you. Well, thank you, Salty Scotch. I appreciate that. Salty Scotch. Might be delicious, but I don't drink. We have chairman of the board says Facebook banned, quote, stop the steal from being used. This snowball is picking up steam. If there was fraud, any chance of it being found is completely gone now. Just a whitewash across the board, gone with the wind. They're going to sweep everything under the rug. Don't even talk about it anymore. If you post about it, we're going to delete it. It is troubling to say the least. Thanks, chairman of the board. I think this is probably just the start of it. So buckle up. John Crute says, if you defend yourself lethally against said person now or same person on death penalty later, I respect your point of view, but they are the same. If you defend yourself lethally against the said person now or same person on death penalty later, I respect your point of view, but they are the same. So I see what you're saying. So John Crute is saying that, all right, let's say that a person was, breaking into your home and he's going to kill you and rape your wife. All right, well, you shoot that person, you just executed the death penalty and they're dead. All right, so, let's say you don't kill that person right then and there, and they commit the heinous offense, and then they are later tried and then put on death row, and they're executed. The same underlying justification that you would have had for shooting them and defending yourself, that extends into the further proceedings that would take place later on in court. So I understand that argument. I think that the difference there would be that one is to protect an imminent potential loss of life, right? So if we're going to be in a very difficult decision where it's our life or their life, it's their life, right? That's a no-brainer. And I'm a Second Amendment advocate myself too. Believe me, right? I support that. I have a lot of enjoyment with firearms and that type of stuff. So I'm not trying to bring that argument into this, but I am just saying that there's an imminent protection of your life. You are saving yourself against imminent harm. And once that situation is done and over and that person is now being, prosecuted or what have you, then there is not that imminent threat anymore. And so the justification for executing somebody who is threatening you is a little bit different than somebody who is already in custody in federal court, going to spend the rest of their lives in prison. The death penalty, in my mind, is just not effective. If the goal of the death penalty is to disincentivize other people from committing crimes, I don't think there's any evidence of that. If you think that it's cheaper to kill somebody rather than house them in federal prison for the rest of your lives, last I checked, those numbers are wrong. It's a lot more expensive to kill somebody than it is to keep them in custody for a very long period of time. So it's a hot topic. I just think that we want to err on the side of life. If there's ever going to be a distinction, we want to just be more cautious by erring on the side of life rather than death. And that's why I think, generally speaking, the death penalty is no good. But I understand your point, John Crutz, and I appreciate that. Thanks for the little bit of a challenge on that. Sasha Sisha says, hi, Rob and Miss Faith. Did you read the news on the House proposing an amendment to abolish the Electoral College, Twitter being hypocrites, and they're calling out Uganda for shutting down the internet? Twitter. That's a bad word, isn't it? I shouldn't have said that word. Okay, so being hypocrites and calling out Uganda for shutting down the internet. So totally, Twitter is a very hypocritical, massive double standards across the board there. But I did not see the House proposing an amendment to abolish the Electoral College. I'll take a look at that. Why would they want to do that, though? They just won the election. I think they only want to do that. I thought they only wanted to do that when they lost the elections, but they won this one. Beth Coddington, she said it is a common tactic in Japan, also China, from what I hear. I'll send you a copy of the interview. And so that's Beth Coddington. She's referring to an earlier super chat where I would love a copy, Beth. An earlier super chat that she had where she was saying that some individuals were, breaking into the Capitol building, changing their clothes, coming out, having interviews. The whole thing was highly coordinated, highly orchestrated. And I haven't seen any of that. I've seen a lot of murmurings about that this was highly sophisticated and there was, corroboration between multiple parties and all that stuff. But I just haven't seen that put together well. So if you have that, Beth, I'd love to see it. Another one from Salty Scotch says, just the facts. Thank you. Thanks, Salty Scotch. Go check out Salty Scotch. They look like they have a channel. Pesci35 says, could Clinton and the Democrats know who be impeached for the failed impeachment of Trump? Could Clinton and the Democrats who know be impeached for the failed impeachment of Trump? So I see what you're saying. You're talking about a little bit of, how about this, right? Some of that, and how about this, and a little bit more of that, and you're pointing fingers back and forth. You want to impeach me? I'll impeach you right back, and then I'm going to impeach you for impeaching me, and then we're going to have even more impeachments, and I'm going to impeach your mother and her mother and his mother, and we're just going to impeach the hell out of everybody. And I think, sure, why not, right? If they're going to impeach, if they're going to just do impeachment for whatever the hell they want, for no basis, just because the political winds are at their sails, then sure. I mean, I think the Republicans should impeach them for everything also. First of all, if every single congressperson got impeached, and if we had to throw Trump in there also, and I'm okay with that. Let's impeach the entire Congress and get some new blood in there. I'd be all right with that. So impeachment fury. Let's get it. We have RCF Gum says, how can the American public get to view the security cameras at the Capitol? There has to be cameras everywhere. So I'm sure there are. That's all going to be, protected. I'm sure there's even more strict national security laws and things like that are put in place specifically for the Capitol building and government buildings. But a lot of that should come out in what's called discovery. So as a defendant, as a criminal defendant who's been charged with a crime, there is going to be a process of discovery where the government has to disclose the evidence that they have against a person who's been charged as being a part of the riots. They have to tell them what evidence we've got, right? It's the government has the file. They have the evidence. They've got the FBI agents. They've got the surveillance footage. They've got their recordings. They've got all of the videos that everybody sent in from around the country. They have it all. And so as a defendant, if you want to make a good defense for your case, you want to be able to present your case in court, you got to know what the government has. And as part of discovery, that should be disclosed back to the defense. So I would presume that we will see more of that when some of these defendants get to that stage in their case. Usually that stage is like 30 days after the fact. So maybe a month from now, we'll see a lot more of this. We'll see some of the evidence that is being proffered forth for the government against these defendants, and we'll be able to take a look at it. So I expect that we'll be talking about these riots for some period of time to try to dissect what actually took place there. Ethan James says, I have a question about the legality of a special detail my department is conducting and has to do with COVID checkpoints. I feel morally obligated to question this as I feel it's against the oath. So that sounds like a complicated question there, Ethan. Questions about the legality of a special detail my department is conducting. Has to do with COVID checkpoints. I feel morally obligated to question this as I feel it's against the oath. It's a good question. Well, I would maybe just talk about that with your, this is a vague question, so it's hard for me to give you any pointed thoughts on it. But, if you took an oath is a good foundational point. And if you're working at a good company or at a good governmental department or whatever that is, the oath should be sort of the bedrock, right? You take an oath, you swear an oath. It's very important. Everything else is sort of secondary to the underlying principles. Okay, we talk about safety, clarity, and hope here at our office. We want to provide that to everybody we work with. If we provide safety, clarity, and hope, that's our bedrock, that's our foundation. So if we have a policy that we put in place, like a COVID checkpoint, which we would never do, but if we did, and one of our employees came to us and they said, hey, I think this particular checkpoint or this particular policy, it actually doesn't provide any safety, any clarity, or any hope. It just kind of does the opposite of that. I would immediately say, let's investigate this and potentially change it. It's a good way to raise a cause or raise an issue, as long as you tie it back to your first principles. Good question, Ethan. We have another one from Lava Java Lava. What's your take on Biden's 100-day mask mandate? Is it more symbolic than scientific? Is Sloppy Joe trying to mimic Roosevelt? Yeah, I think honestly at this point, masks are, I think they're probably useful. I don't know to what extent, because about half the people, if not 3/4 of the people that I see, it's one of these always. This is where the mask is, myself included, right? It's always here. Sorry about that. It's always right here. It's kind of hanging off your face. I mean, people are just over the masks. So it's just symbolic. I think it's virtue signaling for a lot of people. I mean, when you see it on TV, when Nancy Pelosi is giving a speech in front of an empty room with nobody within 20 feet of her, but she's on camera and she's talking into the microphone like this, you can't hear anything she's saying because she's got a mask on her face. It's nothing but virtue signaling, right? It's just to show people, I'm a masker. You should be a masker too. I think the masks are probably useful in preventing you from spreading it out. It's stopping you from sort of being, getting your spittle all over the place. But is it scientific? Is it going to be cutting COVID numbers in half or anything like that? Well, I don't know. We've had mask mandates for 9 months and our COVID numbers are through the roof. We've had lockdowns for 10 months now and COVID numbers are spiking all over the place. So does it work? Apparently not, right? I don't know. Maybe if we didn't have mask mandates or if we didn't have lockdowns, maybe the numbers would be triple or quadruple. I don't know. But the issue here, I think, at least from a political perspective, is it's virtue signaling. You're either with Joe Biden or you're not. You're either a masker or you're not. You're either fall in line and you're allowed to have a platform, or you don't and you're booted off and escorted out from everything. I think that's all it comes down to. Good to see you, Lava. We have another one from JB. Says, the idea that taking over a building is how overthrowing a government works, especially in this age of communication, is very lazy thinking. Perhaps in the days of lords and kings that had some merit. Yeah, I was thinking about this, JB. I think this is a very interesting thought. There was an idea that is sort of king of the hill, right? If you make it to the top, you secure the perimeter of the building, you capture the castle back during the English wars or whatever those were, then you win, right? It's capture the flag. I got the flag. I'm in control. I win the game. That's not how it works anymore. Okay, they could have the Capitol building. They could have set up Chaz in the Capitol building. The U.S. government would have been perfectly functional. Would have had everything fine, unless they start, if they would have gotten Mike Pence or Nancy Pelosi and they hold them hostage or something like that, that could be very troubling for the functioning of our democracy. But, that didn't happen. Just the fact that they captured a building, it's just a building, right? It's an important building. It's got a lot of history. It's got a lot of symbolic value, a lot of meaning to it. I've been there several times. It's a beautiful building. I love traveling around D.C., but it's not the country, right? If they set up Chaz in the Senate chambers, they don't control the country. They don't get the nuclear codes. They don't get to dictate anything. They're not going to be setting up, budgetary committees and judiciary committees and interviewing people for their new Supreme Court. I mean, it's not how it works. So this idea that they were just going to, install execute a coup is just laughable. We have another one from Teek. Says, what if something bad happens? Could the military take over and then the original March 4th inauguration date, pre-FDR, take over? Good question, Teek. I don't think so. First of all, I don't want the military to take over. I've made this point a number of times that, I don't like a consolidation of government power. I like that we have 3 branches right now. If we bring the military in or the military comes in, I'll be 100% opposed to that, because then we wouldn't have 3 branches of civilian government. We would have 1 branch of a military government. And I don't want that at all. Not at all. And then to your second point about March 4th, the law changed, right? The date changed, and we've been following that date. So I don't think any court, a civilian court or a military court, could have a legitimate justification for just picking a different date on their own. The date is set in law, in U.S. code. We've read through those rules, and I don't think anything changes that. So I think we can be pretty sure that this is done and over. We have Sharon Quidney who says, are you going to do another seminar on your existence system? I would really like that. Well, Sharon, I'd be curious as to what else you would like. I mean, I covered, I think, almost all of it. So she's talking about this. This is my existence system worksheet. On the first of the year, on January 1st this year, we did about an hour and a half session on how I use that, went through some books, went through some of my personal stuff. It was like a little bit comfort zone. I had to like step out of that comfort zone a little bit. But we did that on January 1, and it was fun. And I would love to know how else I could help, Sharon. So just let us know if you have any questions or you need any more guidance on it. Be happy to help out with that. That document is available for free in Discord, and it's also available if you watch the video from January 1st, you will see you can download that document so you can check it out. But good question, Sharon. I'm glad that you were enjoying that. Me Thompson says, a Podium guy was offering to take people's photos with Podium. See Michael Yon website. So, okay, right? So he was just having a good time. He was just partying around with the speaker's Podium. Wrong, illegal, criminal behavior, not excusing it, not endorsing it, not sedition, okay? Not a coup. Just some guy who was acting, he wasn't an idiot, he was acting like an idiot on this particular day. That does not amount to sedition to me. We have S. Love says, it's fine. Trump supporters hold a lot of spending money in the U.S. Whatever Trump does after, we'll support and go with him. He has a lot of power and our money. I agree. I'm not worried about Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump is going to be just fine. Wherever he lands, he's going to have a massive audience. Even though currently, a lot of people are sort of, I would say, under the bed, kind of hiding out their support for the president. There is a lot of support for it. And I saw a new poll. I still think something like 17% or something like that of Democrats still have questions about what happened this last election. And there's a lot of support for, I think, him outside the election regardless. And he's going to be just fine. My bigger concern, honestly, is me. It's small guys. It's people who have smaller platforms, who want to have conversations, engage in political conversations, discourse, where sometimes we don't talk about popular things, right? We don't talk about everything not everything is rosy and rainbows on this channel. We talk about some controversial stuff, and I take some difficult positions sometimes, and that's good. That's good for America. That's better for the country. We get to explore ideas and have conversations and think through some things. So I'm more worried about what big tech is going to do to the little guy, not so much Donald Trump. Donald Trump is symbolic. It is surprising as hell that they can do that to a president. But the real ramification is, what does that mean for the grassroots? What does that mean for the people who want to organize? If they can just eliminate an entire contingent of a political party, and let's say it's maybe the most active and most vocal, if they can just get rid of them and say, you don't have a platform, you can't even speak anymore, you can't even exist on the internet as long as we're around, that's more troubling. Trump is always going to have a platform, but the grassroots people who want to see some changes in this country, they may not anymore. It's a bigger issue. Good to see you, S. Love. We have Isaac Castillo. We have tonight was a tough one. Barnes and Dershowitz were duking it out at the same time your show started. Glad I cut out early to catch your show. So, Isaac, I saw that. I thought, those sons of... Because I follow both of them, and they were doing a live show at 7 p.m. tonight, and I said, they are cross-programming us. But that's all right. I love them both. And as we all know, this is all recorded, so you can watch it later. I'm actually going to go watch that one later because I'm sure it was good. We have Shifra Morgan says, thank you so much for what you do. Between you and Uncivil, I am able to boycott all news media. My sister called me so upset, and I set her your way. Well, thanks for that, Shifra. I'm grateful for that. We would love to get more people a part of the show because it's fun when we're able to have these conversations. And I tell you what, I learned a lot. I mean, I learned so much. We save all of these messages, and I'll go back and flip through them, and I'll look stuff up, and it's very, very valuable. So I'm having a lot of fun. I'm glad that you're enjoying it as well, and I appreciate you sending her our way. Hello to Shifra Morgan's sister, Miss Morgan. Good to see you here. We have another one. From Brickley, what happens if Parler and other conservatives no longer get standing in any court? Well, I'm not so sure that is realistic. So the election stuff is a little bit different than this civil litigation stuff. I mean, Parler, I think, clearly has standing, right? They are the ones who are who were hurt. They were the ones who suffered the damage. And the argument on a lot of the standing cases that we saw in election litigation was that the electors, they weren't the ones that got hurt. That Texas they didn't have standing because they didn't get hurt. They weren't necessarily a party to the lawsuit. We saw different Congress people filing suits. We saw other citizens filing suits, and most of those were dumped on the standing basis. So Parler is going to certainly have standing. I would imagine if that gets dumped for standing, then we got much bigger problems in our justice system. So I don't think that's going to happen. I think that they're going to work it out. And, Parler will be back, or another platform will be back. Gab will gobble up a lot of those users. And it may feel like a very bad, dangerous thing, but I don't really see it that way. I mean, I think they just kind of poked a beast. For a long time, it's sort of been crutches. Conservatives and libertarians and, more freedom-minded people have been using Twitter and Facebook and all of these big tech companies as sort of crutches. Just using them because it's the only thing there. This is going to really force a rethinking of that entire structure. They're just going to have to finally go, all right, enough of this already. Okay, we physically cannot use Twitter anymore, so we have to create our own platform. We have to develop a different way to communicate, and that's not bad. I think that actually ends up good in the long run. Currently, in the short term, it's a problem. It's weird. Feels very un-American and very troublesome. But the pendulum swings the other way. Right now, the left and everybody is very, very happy with what they're seeing unfold. But that pendulum is going to swing back, and it probably won't be all that long. We have Turd Ferguson said, person A allocutes and prosecutor has no good faith basis to accept but uses testimony against PB. Isn't that suborning perjury, and the plea can be set aside? So Turd Ferguson is getting really granular with some of this legal analysis, but it's a good point. What he says here is that when I was going through that hypothetical from a different commenter, I think the Wandering Mariner, and he was saying that, well, what if they put in the factual basis when they're issuing a plea deal and they say, well, we're going to implicate somebody else for it, and the person accepts that. So person A points to person B. Judge says, is this factual basis true? Person A says, yep, it's true. Person B did that. That goes into the plea deal. What Turd is saying here is that, well, if that factual basis is not true and they use that, then you can make a good argument to set aside that plea deal. So you basically say that this was a falsified, fraudulent type of a plea deal, and this was only used in order to secure a conviction through a sort of a circuitous route, right? So the government didn't have enough evidence to go after B specifically, so they went through A and they put undue pressure on person A in order to convince A to testify against B, and therefore that's a violation of due process because it's government duress, essentially, right? They're forcing that person through the power of the strong arm of the government to do something that they wouldn't have been able to do themselves. They couldn't have incriminated B on their own. They needed to go recruit somebody to do it. They used the power of the government to recruit A, and so on. So you can play this game a lot, and you can make good arguments to that effect. I would be curious, Turd, just to see if any prosecutor does it, if any U.S. attorney is willing to go that route. I think it'd be very, very provocative, kind of clever. I'd be curious to see how that works. Good question. Chris Wolney says, could some of this Trump censorship aim to prevent him from announcing the declassification of documents? Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think what they're trying to do is just stop conversation across the board. I mean, I think they don't want people to talk about any of this stuff. They want to terminate Trump's presidency early. Remember, as soon as he pardons a number of people, that's going to be headline news. Those are coming. He's going to pardon somebody, and everybody's going to flip out about it. But they want to close some of the windows that he can communicate through. And the ones that he can communicate through, they're going to censor. Like we just played the MSNBC clip, right? She didn't even let Trump finish his thought. She cut him off in the midway and said, well, the president sometimes just gets a little bit out of alignment with the truth. And you go, wait, he didn't even finish his thought. You can't even let him speak. So I think, yes, they're going to want to stop him from communicating, period, in order to further their political cause. And that is a resounding, euphoric, united, utopian Joe Biden inauguration. And they're doing a pretty good job of it. Good to see you, Chris. Thanks for being here. Another one from Brickley says, did you look at the lawsuit that allows propaganda to be used on Americans and allows news media to lie to Americans? So that's Brickley. So that's the Smith-Munt Act. I have not done a deep dive into that. I probably will, though. We may actually talk about that on the show. I kind of want to see where the dust settles a little bit on some of these lawsuits, particularly the Parler lawsuit. But yeah, I mean, this is America. Everybody can lie to everybody. Do you know cops can lie to you too? The Supreme Court has said that. The cops can just lie to you. They can take you in for questioning and they can say, hey, we've got your buddy in the other room over there. He said you did it. And you go, oh, really? They go, yeah, he's right there. Okay, well, if he says I did, he's right. I did do it. You got me. Your friend wasn't next door. Nobody was over there. They have nothing on you, but you just admitted to the whole crime. So everybody is lying to you all over the place, which is why I'm saying, that what we try to do on this show is just talk through some of the issues and then, sort of steel man both sides of the argument, see some stuff that sticks, some stuff that doesn't stick, and then just use reason. I would not take my word for anything, right? I would challenge everything I say. And I do that with the people I watch and listen to, just like I think most people should. But the people who just gobble up whatever CNN says and accept that as the truth, I think they're missing out on a lot of life, a lot of reality, and a lot of truth. JB says the left gains power from a certain demographic doing bad. Maybe they need more reasons to cancel the second, but they no doubt gain power from it. I believe it's the motivation behind their actions. Yes. So when you have, if you can identify a contingent of anything, okay, of a team, let's say you're playing a team game, a soccer game or a football game, and you've got a weak player and you can exploit that weakness, you can win the game. Okay, even if you have a worse off team. You just identify that weakness and exploit the hell out of it. In this case, yeah, there is a weakness for the Republicans, for anybody who is associated with Trump. There's very awful imagery that's floating around the internet of people doing terrible things. And so it's good strategy from a Democratic perspective to lump every one of your opponents into that same bucket. Put them all in there and make them disavow it. Right now, you got to go make all these Republicans. Ted Cruz, where the hell has he been? Where is Josh Hawley? They're both in bunkers hiding. They're waiting for all this to just blow over because they know that if they speak out, they're going to be lumped into that bucket. They're going to be associated with those gross images, even though it's not fair. But the Democrats are good at doing that. And they've got a lot of tools in their toolbox to make that happen. They've got the media. They've got the tech. They've got the newspapers. They've got it pretty much on lockdown. Thanks, JB. Jimmy Hernandez says, Giuliani pulled election fraud court cases in Georgia last week. Why would he do that? Probably because it's moot. It's over now. The election has been decided. It was decided on January 6th, January 7th, technically. I keep saying that. Should have been done on the 6th, but it was the 7th. And once Joe Biden read in those rules or read in the electoral votes into the Congressional Journal, that was the end of the game. So litigation is expensive. It requires a lot of time. If the judge granted it, the only real benefit Giuliani might get out of it would be some discovery or some arguments or get some insight on some of the questions, but probably not. I think that probably the judges would also say it's moot now. Okay, the relief. Remember, in every one of these lawsuits, Giuliani was asking for specific relief. They were saying, well, you got to throw out this bucket of votes, 100,000 here, 10,000 here, 50,000 there, and you got to, decertify the state and all that stuff. It's all moot. It's all done. It's all over. So the court can't grant him that remedy, so the lawsuits necessarily fail. Good to see you there, Jimmy Hernandez. Teacherman, 1955, says, it's refreshing to listen to someone who knows what they are talking about. Keep up the good work. Love this channel. Well, I love you back, Teacherman, 1955. I appreciate that. And I like that you believe I know what I'm talking about. That's pretty cool. I do my best. There are some things that I know a little bit about. There's some things I know less about, but doing my best. We're trying to sort of make sense of all this together, and I appreciate you joining us on that journey. Another one from Sabo Abba says, the death penalty is cruel, right? My friend Julie was tortured, raped, and murdered by someone, and he was proven guilty of the murder in a court of law. So what do you want to do with him? It's a good question, Sabo, and this one comes up regularly, right? I don't endorse murdering your friend or raping or torturing her, okay? Awful, horrendous, right? Horrendous. I'm so sorry that you went through that. So sorry that she went through that. I hope he's okay. And I hope the family's okay. And I hope that they get things back on track. doesn't mean that killing this other guy by execution is going to make that better. Okay, it's not going to, in my opinion, it wouldn't particularly bring me peace. The fact that he's dead doesn't undo what happened, doesn't undo the murder, doesn't undo the rape, doesn't undo the torture. He's going to spend the rest of his life in prison, and that's going to be it. That's what we should do with him. End of the story. I can't justify killing him because he did something bad. I think that it's better to defer on the side of life. We don't know that person's story. We don't know what trauma that person went through. We don't know how abused or raped or tortured that individual was. And it's a more human thing to forgive than to exact revenge. My opinion. And I can sort of speak a little, I'm not going to go there. Good question though, Sabo. This stuff gets a little bit heated. Once again, I am very sorry for your friend. I hope she's doing well. Thanks for the tough question. MJ says, I'll second that impeachment for all if it drains the swamp. Yeah, let's just get rid of impeachment fever. We should just, all just impeach everybody. I'm okay with that. All right, MJ, we have another one from Sabo. Have you read Animal Farm lately? No, my goodness. So Sabo as Animal Farm. No, I've not read that since, when do you read that? Grade school? Middle school? Been a long time. Have not read it. We have another one from Las Vegas Retired. Says, #1 fan. Thank you for that, Las Vegas. Appreciate the support. And then you can see we're wrapping up here. Just a couple more. Pinky #2 says, have you seen JFK Jr. at Trump rallies with his wife, sister-in-law, and son? No, JFK Jr. at Trump rallies. JFK Jr. Was that the chapstick guy? Was that the chapstick guy who gave that speech? And the chapstick was like up here. I can't do it because I got some facial hair up there. But was he that guy? I thought he was a huge mega Democrat. Don't know why he would be at a Trump rally. Las Vegas Retired says, if an attorney uses a nunc-pro-tunc date to skirt state law to beat the statute of limitations, is that fraud on the order? I don't even know what that question means, Las Vegas Retired. Nunc-pro-tunc date to skirt state law to beat the statute of limitations. Is that fraud on the order? I apologize. I don't understand that question. Yeah, statute of limitations is, so if we're talking about this in the election context, the statute of limitations is you have to bring something within a certain period of time. If you don't bring something within a certain period of time, you lose the right to do that. So we see this in the context of criminal law all the time. Somebody will be charged. A good example would be a DUI case. DUI case, somebody's charged with a DUI. They have their blood drawn. In Arizona, it's not so much the case anymore, but there was a period of time where it was taking our crime lab like 7 months to test somebody's blood, not for alcohol, but for drugs. If you had a marijuana DUI or a cocaine DUI, then they would do all of the initial screenings for alcohol. Then they would have to do a different drug related batch. And it was taking like 6 months, 7 months. And so one of the questions was, well, what happens if they don't get those results back in time and the statute of limitations expires? Then they can't bring the case anymore. They have to bring those charges within 1 year from the date of the violation. If they don't do that, then they can't bring the charges. So in the context of the election, I just don't know really what that means. And you also capitalized fraud on the order. And I just don't know what that means either. So I apologize for that, Las Vegas. I'll take a look at that one and see if I have a better answer for tomorrow. RCF Gum says, Biden and Harris, the best salesmen for the firearm industry. Is that still going on? So I know that during the summer months that the gun stores were just gone, just totally gone. I specifically went to buy my mom a firearm, and it's her birthday in the summer months, and I went into the gun store and there was like nothing left. I mean, it was wild. I go to this place regularly, and normally shelves, floor to ceiling, are all stocked and ammo everywhere, whatever you need. Good to go. It's a good place, but empty, gone. It was wild. I've never seen anything like it. It was like out of a horror movie. You know, when you walk in and the shelves are just raided. It was worse than the toilet paper aisles. Good Lord. So I'm wondering if that is still going on. And it looks like our last one comes from Sam Lamb, who says, did you hear Bill Belichick will not accept the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Trump, whom he calls a friend? Sad sport involved in politics. You know, it's just so, yeah, it's so politically hot right now that you just can't be associated with the president. It's a bummer for Bill Belichick. You know, I'm not a Patriots fan at all. Not at all. I like Patriots, but not the football team. And it's one of those, I'm not a football guy anyways. I could really care one way or the other. I don't watch much sports, but yeah, you know, for a guy like Bill, right? Somebody has had a hell of a career, outstanding coach, accomplished a ton, you know, multiple Super Bowls, and doesn't get that Medal of Freedom because of politics. Well, that stinks. Maybe Joe will give him one. We'll see. All right, my friends. Well, that was it. So we did have some more Super Chats than I thought. I want to thank you so much for sending all of those in. Let's wrap it up here because we'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. Before we sign off, a couple quick things. Would love to subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber, if you're watching on replay or you're watching now and you just want to subscribe. We'd love if you did that. We'd also really like a thumbs up, you know, to give us that like. And that helps the algorithm. We're sort of in this political bubble for the time being that YouTube kind of keeps us in because we talk about some of this provocative stuff. And those, you know, likes, comments, shares help the channel get a little bit more exposure so that we can bring some other people into the fold so they can join us in this conversation. So we would very much appreciate that. One more reminder that the slides are going to be available in the Discord server. So Faith is probably assembling those right now, throwing those in there. Discord is a free place to chat. So you can just come in and talk before the show, after the show, during the show. Some of the questions Miss Faith pulls come from there as well. So we would love to have you there. There is a free copy of my book in there as well. So you can see this book, Beginning to Winning. This physical book is not in the chat, but there is a PDF, so you can download that for free. If you want the physical copy, you can get that on Amazon. It's called Beginning to Winning, How to Fight Your Case in the Criminal Justice System. And it's mostly for people who've been charged with crimes, gives you a little bit of a framework on how the process works. And the first chapter is a little introduction, learn a little bit more about me, how I got here, why I do the things that I do. And we saw Sharon also mention the existence system. So this is part of the sheet. You can see here, we've got daily momentum. We've got some of my daily metrics over here. I'm focused on, you know, YouTube stuff. And I did a whole presentation on how that whole system works. And that was posted on our channel on January 1st. But the template and the presentation is also in Discord. So you can go on over there and get that for free. No problem at all. Just use it. I hope you use it. I hope you take something that I talked about and implement it in your life. Probably the 4-7-8 breathing. 4 counts in, 7 counts hold, 8 counts out will change everything for you. If you do nothing else this year, just do the 4-7-8 breathing. It is a game changer. I'm not even joking. Helps anxiety, helps sleep, helps everything. It's very, very good. Other than that, my friends, I want to remind you one last time, I am a criminal defense attorney. That's what we do. That's my day job. I spend all day, you know, managing this firm and helping our attorneys crush it in court and help our clients find that safety, clarity, and hope. We take cases all throughout Arizona, any place in Arizona. If it's a criminal charge, we can help. It's a free case evaluation, no obligations, happy to help. If they come by the office, get a copy of my book, whatever they need, we'll send them out better than when they came in. We love what we do. We're very good at it. We'd be honored if you had a referral for us because we know we'll take good care of them. It would mean the world. So that's it. Otherwise, I hope to see you back here tomorrow. Same time, same place. It's going to be 5 p.m. Arizona time. That's Mountain. 4 p.m. on the West Coast over in California, 6 p.m. Central in Texas, 7 p.m. on the East Coast. Every single day of the week, we want you to be here so we can talk. There's a lot to talk about. We will carry on. Thank you once again for joining us. Have a very lovely evening. Rest well. See you back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.